information, and this evening we're going to receive some continued information concerning the budget, and Mr. Moyer and Mr. Hale are going to kick us off, so.
Yeah, as the Mayor said, a couple of weeks ago, we looked on the CIP. We'll have a follow-up for that tomorrow. What we're talking about here the next few weeks we're all gonna take turns talking about our operational budget for this coming year. So what we'll do here tonight is I'll start off talking about the overview. Then I'll hand it to Shane, and then Jennifer is going to speak, and then Eric's after that. So thank you all for coming, and we'll get going here. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'll talk about the revenues first. I think I put some of this information in my weekly reports. The property tax increase from nearly $2 million. And I want to stress on that, while it's a dollar amount increase, it's not a change in our bill rate. It's driven simply by the increase in our assessed valuation. As you can see there, the assessed valuation increased almost $160 million. So we apply our same mill levy to that higher number, and you get more revenue. We had a residential increase in both Weld and Larimer, as you can imagine with the number of building permits we've been issuing. That stands to reason. And the O&G is the oil and gas assessed valuation increase of $71.5 million. And I would say that almost all of the oil and gas increases in Weld County. There's very little activity in Larimer County. A couple other things today. We have a couple of monthly user rate studies going on. Talking about the storm drainage. We read about that today, actually. And a lot of that is due to the MS4 regulations that the storm drainage has to comply with. Water rates, we do that every year. We've talked at length about the importance of water and having enough, and that NISP, we also, John Thornhill and I went to the meeting on NISP this morning. So no shortage of money to spend there. So what does all this mean? The totals here, now as it says at the top, this is all the funds. This is general, water, on and on. In the far right column there, you see the 2020 budget. Now this is using the numbers from just this past Friday, October 4th. So this is the most recent stuff that we have. The top line there, starting the year with $84.6 million. Next line down is the revenue we plan to collect in 2020, 75.5. Add those two together, that gives us $160 million to work with. So as it stands now, total expenditures are 81.9, almost $82 million. Then you subtract that out, and that leaves a balance of 78.1 million. So you can see our budgets have grown over the years. Let me click on this next one. And how that money, here again, there's 81.9. How that money is used in this version of the budget, you can see, as is usually the case with us, the biggest part of it is capital outlay, followed by personnel, followed by operations and maintenance, and finally debt service and interfund transfers. So that's very broad categories there of the numbers on the previous page.
We don't have that document anywhere, the slide that you just showed.
This one?
Yeah.
I
Put
don't,
it in a printed, it's not in.
I don't think so, but I can give you, one. I can get you a paper copy.
And we can email, I mean, these PowerPoint presentations were still, I was talking to staff at like 4 o'clock today, we're still working on these. We're happy to email that to the board. It's just, these are really kind of, you know, the board packets need to go out on Thursday. And staff really likes to take that Friday to go to Monday, still working on the PowerPoint. So we'll just send these PowerPoints out to everybody.
Okay, so what this one is again, here you see the expenditures 81.9. And what I'm doing here is talking about all the different funds. Now, when you get down into the utility funds, we break it into both operations and maintenance. PIF is plant investment fee. PIF NISP is a fee we charge for the NISP program. Raw water and non-potable. Now, don't be alarmed here that some parts of those have negative balances, because the whole, basically I add all these together and it turns out to be a positive fund balance for the fund as a whole. The reason we break it up like that is to delineate so we don't get in trouble using some kind of money we're not allowed to use it for. For instance, we're not allowed to use a water tap fee to pay our guys to read the meters. It's very, either by vote or by law, it's restricted as to what you can do with it. So I talked about that. The sewer and the water and the drainage fee are the same way. And then, on and on, fleet management, and that's all of our funds there. So again, this is another way of showing the stuff we showed on the other pages in total. And again, the 81.9 there leave us with 78.1 at the end of 2020, if it all goes right. So, any questions so far? Everybody's eating. I picked this one pretty good, right? Whoops. Okay, so next is I'm going to turn it over to Shane here.
Okay, thank you. So harkening back to Dean's first slide, when he showed the total amount of revenue and cash coming forward and our expenditures, you'll notice that we were spending more than we're bringing in. I want to point out to a couple slides later that showed our capital funds. That is really this year, the amount of money we're spending in capital is really where we're going into our reserves. When you look at things like operationally with the general fund, again, this budget actually forecasts bringing or having a surplus of about 1.5 million this year. So everything that I show you tonight when we talk about staffing operationally, we're sound, it's a balanced budget. Any spending into reserves is just on those capital items for those one-time targeted expenses. And most of that spending is on road improvement. So that's a little bit of a harbinger for you. So the budget focus this year, obviously, oh shoot, I'm going too fast, sorry. Well, I'll tell you what I said. We're working on the strategic plan, still trying to implement that. Again, most of those items come on the CIP list. I tried to, with my budget transmittal letter, to really show you the different CIP and the strategic plan priorities and what we're budgeting this year to fund with those. And then the other thing, I think the other theme is just trying to keep up with the growth, taking a look at all these departments and just the workload that they're seeing day in, day out, and trying to line staff a little bit better with that, but still keeping an eye on the fact that, I'm really cognizant of the fact that the bubble could burst tomorrow. It feels like this growth is not going to go on forever. So how do we grow responsibly? How do we address the amount of workload demands we have now, while not bringing on, a really heavy burden with staff to where if we hit a recession, we're looking at layoffs. So I don't think anybody wants to go through that world. So I did a pretty detailed staffing request memo. It's in your packet. You guys had a chance to review that. So I'll just go through the overview, and I don't know if you guys just want to ask me questions as I go, or I guess if, just throw a piece of pizza at me if you have any questions. So I request these or broke them down per department. So in admin services, we're requesting 2 full-time positions, an HR tech. So again, just with my explanatory memo, just the number of personnel, the compliance issues, the other things we're having in HR, we really do need to bring on a 4th person in that department to help them with that workload. Okay, I'm sorry, thank you. The communications coordinator in the comms department, we basically have 1 full-time communications person that's dedicated solely to Parks, Recs, and Culture. Then we have our comms manager that is basically divided between the other departments. I think when we look at our communication that we're trying to get out on water, on MS4, on through the PD, through public road works and roads and stuff, we have a pretty high demand internally for that work to push out that message. All the other positions listed there are basically reclassifications. So we have 1 reclassification in HR, 1 reclassification in also in communications, taking our part-time video person and bringing him to full-time. And then the rest of our reclassifications are all in IT. And right now that department, like I tried to explain in my memo, is pretty flat. Everybody's direct report to Corinne. So doing all these reclassifications will basically build a lot more structure in there. So we'll have a lot better reporting responsibilities, and I think we'll also bring some more focus to those specific individuals. In community development, we're requesting 2 full-time positions. The first is a permit tech. So we have had some good help from Safe Built. They have sent staff 3 days a week to help us process permits. But it's really data entry. It's a lot of Robin's workload is really not being addressed by these folks. And, we have had times when they haven't been able to provide their staff because of their own workload and their own internal demands. And so, I think that we're definitely ready to bring on some help for her. Again, this year we're looking at our biggest building permit year, and it never seems to stop. We're also requesting a planning tech. The board, when I started, had talked about its desire to contract with outside planning firms to really get us that help, see if we could kind of take these projects and not have as big of a burden internally. The challenge is that we've given these guaranteed turnarounds to, I think, every developer. And so there's really no financial incentive for them to contract with an outside firm if they can just go through the town. So we've kind of solicited out to bring in this outside firms, and it just hasn't worked as we had hoped. I think that we are able to, and we have talked about other internal projects like doing our land use code, offshoring that and having an outdoor firm do it. But for the day-to-day workload, for the permit processing, for the all the land use applications we're seeing, it doesn't seem that we have enough staff for that. And I would just say that you'll probably all know that we've had, as a department, probably more turnover in planning than other departments, especially given its size. And there's numerous reasons that people leave a job, but a common theme in almost every exit interview has just been the workload here. So we just know these folks are finding that they can have a smaller commute, maybe better pay, and certainly not as big of as a workload demand. For finance, we're requesting 1 new position, payroll clerk. And again, as you look in there, we have a lot of generalists and a lot of shared responsibilities in payroll. As we get larger, I think we're able to get a little bit more sophisticated there, reroute where some of the workflows go, give some more help up top for Dean and Cheryl, and I think also do some, gives us the ability to kind of groom the next generation for leadership as well. We are also recommending 1 reclassification there. Our accounting manager last year, I think it became really obvious when Dean, lost his battle with that motorcycle, and he was out for quite a while. He was really close to winning that thing. But just seeing the level of sophistication that we get from our incumbent, how much we rely on her and the level of work she's doing, And so just reclassifying her to Deputy Finance Director, I think, is a lot more commensurate with the work she's actually doing. Economic Development, we're just requesting a reclassification, and so that's just taking Jill from Development Specialist to Business Development Specialist. So again, we've aligned this with other municipalities, and the workload seems to match up well.
Shane, can you hold it there? Where are you getting all the numbers that are on here? Like, where do you start at? Where you, like 79,101, kind of a.
Okay, so that includes, that's the payroll, that's the benefits, and that's any equipment. And so there is a spreadsheet in your packet, and it has, I can't remember what page is on. Anybody? No, not that one. Page 21 of your packet.
I guess what I'm getting at is if you're looking at other municipalities and what they have with certain classification, because we have a lot of reclassifications, so that's where was that through the pay study, or where did we get, or why do we need so many different reclassifications? That's what
Okay, so
I just want to follow along with that before you answer, because, yeah, we went through that last year pretty heavily.
Mhm.
And so what do we have to do that we're not constantly maybe going through this mode? I mean, it seems
Right.
like year after year after year. And,
Well-
I mean, just lately, it has not always been like this. It's been like this just within the last couple of years.
Okay, well, I would say, for IT, which is a big swath there, it's really more of, again, the direct reporting is just everybody reports to one person. And so this reclassification is building a lot more structure in there. So, we did kind of a larger reorganization last year, but when we look department by department, I think we have a lot of departments individually looking at their own organization and how they're classified. And again, I think as this organization's grown, we haven't necessarily grown department by department, and so we're still pretty flat. So, last year I looked at how many direct reports I had, how that worked out. I think a lot of departments have kind of followed that as well and taken a look at their own reporting relationships and how that works. So, yeah, I don't know that there would be an end to looking at these, and I would hope that people don't stop looking at them. I hope that these department heads are continually assessing their departments, taking a look and seeing what reporting relationships still make sense, and also recognize people when they've taken on more and more and more, and really looking at the threat of like, geez, this person is all of a sudden grown into doing a lot more than we hired them for. It makes sure we're competitive. So I don't think it's a trend that I would see going away. I think to be a competitive employer, we need to continue to take a look and make sure that we're make sure our folks are classified accordingly. So this doesn't really change the pay study. We still had all of our pay structures set in there. This just, so and a long way to go back. So if you take like the economic development specialist, when we took a look at the actual responsibilities and we worked with HR and we had them compare and say, okay, let's see where this falls in with Mountain States Employers Council and these job descriptions, and we went through all of that and then back to back into our pay study and said, okay, given these responsibilities, where would that fall in our pay study? So that's kind of how we work into it. I mean, we use our existing data with our pay study, and we also use like Mountain States Employers Council and other folks to make sure that we're, getting those job descriptions right.
Well, I mean, the reason I ask is my worry looks like we're just approving a bunch of reorganization, like when we did the pay study, where somebody wasn't this title, they should be this title, and because of that, I mean, we have reclassifications up there totaling about $80,000-$90,000, if not more, if you include the part-time and full-time visual media. But I'm talking about all of the other IT analysts, the business analyst, an IT analyst, assistant administrator. I mean, it looks like either we were way off, or we're giving new titles to be able to bump people's pay up. I don't know.
Right, so if you can refer back to the memo, I did talk about IT specifically also, that like last year they had requested a security analyst. The board had approved it. It's not a position we could hire for. They also requested a business analyst this year, which is not a position that I was comfortable bringing on right now. And so they're doing a lot of, I think, a little bit more focus in each position, taking a look. Everybody's taking on security responsibilities now and doing that training. And again, I think more than anything that I would relate to IT is just
Right now, everybody reports to one person. It has one person who's doing all the leadership there. And this is, I think, identifying some other people in the department that have been here for a while, have those leadership attributes, creates a little bit more structure in there and reporting. And again, you know, for IT, if you look at the 5 in there, and it's 7, 5, 6, I mean, 18 to $28,000. You know, I know it's real money, but it's not bringing on another staff person or something. It's really, I think, changing those reporting relationships.
It's a small department, though, too. It's not like 20 people are trying to report to one person.
Right, but I think that is there 9 total, 10 total? So it's quite a few. I mean, to have one person overseeing that many folks. So that's what's in there. And again, Paul, I would say this is not an attempt to just reclassify to get people a bump. I think this is just, again, in this job market, looking at employees that are carrying more than their burden, recognizing them for that. And, you know, these things don't come lightly. You know, this process is, you know, sometimes initiated by the supervisor, sometimes initiated by the employee who knows what their cohorts are doing, what they're doing. And so these things happen, you know, they build over time. These are not just little quick, let's do this.
Well, we know turnover in IT could be detrimental. I'm not trying to, you know, skimp anybody on what their duties are and being, offering them a competitive wage. I just, you know, feel like it's our right to ask, you know, our need to ask about, you know, so many different reclassifications.
Well, these are also just recommendations, and just like with the capital project, we can have an additional conversation and relook at any of this and have further discussion and, you know, make changes as
Sure.
the board would see.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. So, the next page, Parks, Recs, and Culture. So there is a new open space and trails technician requested. If you looked at the accompanying memo, you'll see between the contract services that we have and the part-time person we currently have, this is basically a budget wash. And so I think the only trade is that we'll have somebody for 52 weeks a year versus 26 weeks a year. So it does make good fiscal sense to replace that position. The museum aide is reclassification. That's a request to go from a part-time position to a year-round position. And then there's 2 new part-time positions requested. One more museum program aide, and the second one is for Treasure Island, and that's just giving them a little bit of seasonal help. Right now it's all volunteer driven. I think we want to keep that model, but they're also just need help hauling trash, pulling weeds, with the irrigation, just some of the heavier, more laborious parts of that job. And they have requested a lot of help from parks over the last couple of years, and we have sent staff as we can, but it's certainly created a bit of a rub just because we don't always have staff available, but they always have that work. The police department, so we're requesting 2 new patrol officers. One is a replacement for one of the sergeants that would get reclassified, and then one would be an overhire position. And then we would request them to reclassify 2 officers to sergeant. So right now, just kind of when you get into that leadership team, the sergeants are carrying a pretty big burden. So giving them a little bit more help up top to help cover those shifts. And then finally creating one more lieutenant position, or actually we're going to reclassify them to commander, but giving that leadership team and the command staff some more help as well. Public Works requesting 1 equipment operator position. So this will be partially through storm drains. So this will be somebody who helps out with the street sweeping and plowing, and a lot of the other kind of storm drain maintenance position work that comes up. 1 new facilities tech part-time, and this is mostly in response to having the new Parks Public Works facility. We're adding a lot of square footage on. We have just more building burden, and then part of this too is just right now with the workflow with our 2 staff, a lot of times they'll be in the middle of a project and get called away for just kind of the daily duty question things. And so we think that this part-time person will help be able to jump in and kind of do the daily work when our full-time guys get into big projects. and then also a custodian, and this custodial staff will help out again with the new parks space, parks public works space, and help our custodial staff cover that additional space. And then town attorney requesting to take our current attorney from 30 hours a week to 35 per week. And then positions not recommended, they were requested, so there's 9.5 there. I'm not going to read those back down for the board. They were in the memo, but there were, again, I thought we had to draw a line somewhere as far as what I'd recommend to the board. So that's kind of where the line was drawn.
Shane, can we go back one slide really quick? When we say assistant attorney, are we talking about Kim?
Yes.
So I'm assuming that she's already getting full-time benefits if she's already 30 hours a week, right, according to the labor, this, that, and the other.
FLSA, yep.
Why up to 35? Why, does she want full-time? I mean, do we have enough to keep her busy 40 hours a week? Or what?
I believe,
I don't know.
yeah.
I know she's more of a direct report to the board.
She is, and when she's not, she's reporting to the town attorney.
Right.
So honestly, I haven't discussed her hours a whole lot with her. I do believe with her, whatever's going on in her life, and I think that this amount of hours would work better for her. But I also know that this year, at the end of the year, I meet with the board, and the town attorney meets with the board, kind of annual evaluation. And I have talked to Kim about putting her on that slide as well, so she can just meet with the board as a prosecutor, and so you could ask her that question.
Pre-budget getting approved, or is that, I mean?
Well, the 30 to 35, it would be, I guess, I don't know if we get in November, early December, it's going to be pretty close.
I'm just saying, should the board want to do something after a conversation with her? That's the only reason
Yeah, well, I mean, I could certainly follow up with her tomorrow and see if she'd be interested in the 40 hours. Again, this was kind of the
I'm just
request.
asking because it just seems like, 5 hours difference, right, where it's already full-time benefits, and that's right. And I'm thinking 5 more hours per week, there's the 15,000, so it's probably $5,000 more than here, if she's willing to do it or if she wants it. I don't know, I'm sorry to get into the weeds on that one, I just thought.
Okay, well, I could certainly, let me do this. I'll ask her tomorrow. I'll send her an email and see if she was interested in 40, because again, I was a little bit not as tied directly to that, because Kim doesn't ever report to me. She reports to the board or to Ian, so I didn't.
You just don't have that opportunity to dialogue with her, prior to the request.
Okay, and then there are, with this proposed budget, a couple positions that are, would be eliminated. One is the seasonal open space and trails tech by bringing on that full-time position. The second one is the part-time streets tech by bringing on that equipment operator. Oh, gosh darn it. Okay, and now I think Jen's going to jump up. So, we had a conversation with the board a couple months ago about some proposed benefits. The board said, these should really be aligned with the personnel request and the budget overall. So this is that presentation. So Jen, if you want to come up, and I won't get far.
Okay. Hello. So we wanted to come back and this is again from our July 1st work session and revisit our proposals, and we narrowed them down to 3 for your consideration that we would like to make effective January 1st, 2020. And so the first one is the 401A vesting schedule, adding a vesting schedule to that plan. We feel by adding a vesting schedule, that's going to help with the retention and really promote longevity with our employees, and we can talk more about that with the next slides. Additionally, we'd like to add for our vacation for our full-time employees, we'd like to add additional tiers and accruals. That's in an effort to, again, with retention and recruitment, but also to be competitive within the marketplace. And then finally, adding part-time employees to our employee assistance program. And really that's just going in the right direction culturally, and it adds value to the program. And our part-time employees right now are about 40% of our workforce. Also, we included some FAQs. Hopefully all of you have copies of those, but there's some more information in that. But really, in a nutshell, why we're doing this is because we want to attract and keep our quality employees. We want to be competitive in the marketplace. And then also, we want to make sure that we're really promoting work-life balance for our employees. So this talks about our 401A vesting schedule, and it goes over the current schedule to our proposed schedule. Currently, employees need to be here for 1 year, and after 1 year of employment, the town contributes towards the 401A. We're proposing to add a 20% vesting schedule, so after full completion of 5 years of employment, that employee at that time will be 100% vested into the 401A. It will begin the first day of hire, and there will be a grandfather option for employees that are kind of in between, so meaning that they were hired in 2019, and the town contribution will remain the same from the current to the proposed. This just talks about and goes over what our current plan is and the expenses per participating employee. We took an average for the salary of employees, which is $63,340. And Carl, thanks again for all your help with the numbers. And so again, it just shows you year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is our proposed change. And again, it's going to be the 20% annual vesting. It begins day 1 of employment for employees. This is, again, going off of a current average salary. And you'll see the expenses, but then really the true cost. So for example, year 1, the true cost would be $760. Year 2, 3, 4, and 5. Any questions so far? This slide here and the next one is pretty much the same information, but it does have a comparison. It shows, again, our current plan and then the proposed plan, and showing the cost and then the savings. So you can see for year 1, there is going to be an additional cost of $760. When we get to year 5, there is that savings of $4,032. However, once we get to year 6, there is that cost to the town.
So, I don't want to skip past this. So the board understands that right now we don't have any vesting schedules. The first year, we don't put in any kind of retirement match on year 1. So right now, our cost in year 1, there's no money. But then people are 100% vested starting day 1 of year 2. With the 5-year vesting, it's really a 6-year schedule. So the first year, you're not even 20% vested until day 1 after year 1. And so if anybody gets their turnover after year 2, after year 3, after 4, the town will have contributed less money towards that person's retirement than we are now. And so the only time when it would cost on any individual where it would cost the town more money is after they've been here for 6 years. After they've got to that 5 years, we will have contributed another year towards their retirement. But overall, looking at the numbers, it looks like the town will actually be less expensive to do it this way. And the employees that we're going to be contributing more for are going to be our long-term employees. So if somebody leaves after year 3, we will have spent less money on them. If they stay to year 6, we will spend more, but again, that's somebody who's been here 6 years. So it's good that we kind of incentivized them and kept them here. So
that's intended to.
It is.
Make it more advantageous to stay.
Yes, that's right.
You got 70% turnover the first 5.
What's that?
The 0 to 5,
0 to 5 years, 74%.
that's pretty expensive, trying to bring new people training.
Exactly.
So why do we think this would work? I mean, I like the concept, but
Right.
is this based on any type of research or experience in employment matters?
Look, these are all, I think, the little efforts to make this more attractive employer. I would say starting to contribute to somebody on day 1 and say, look, we're going to start matching your retirement right away, but there's a vesting schedule that you need to give your 5 years to realize. I think same thing with vacation time, trying to front load those more in those first few years to get people to stay longer. Yeah.
Also a response to our survey and just, the verbatim responses that employees provided at that time. So waiting 1 year was an issue for some employees, the majority of the employees in relation to this.
But we also did see from that survey that we had a majority of employees who were satisfied overall with how things have been currently, and not including police, because I think they're kind of separate. But how many people did we have leave last year? What was our attrition rate?
I can get those numbers for you. I know as of right now for 2019, we're at 11% turnover, and the average is 15%. And so I'm happy to get that, yeah, the numbers for that.
In last year, I thought 10, 11%.
I believe so, but
Yeah.
I don't have it. I don't know for certain, so I don't want to say.
Right. So again, though, I just want to point out with this vesting schedule would not cost the town more money. I believe it would spend less money on this proposed schedule, and the individual employees that receive more benefit are going to be our longer-term employees. So I don't really see a downside with it, unless if somebody comes here and works 3 years and leaves, they're going to have the downside because they'll have less contributed to their retirement. But it's
But yeah, hopefully have that incentive to stay a little bit longer as
Yeah,
well.
That was kind of my question. I think that's fine. What I'm focusing on, that's 74% turnover of 1 to 5 year employees. And this turnover means time in recruiting, and interviewing, and hiring, and training, and all that. Do we have any patterns about why are there certain job classifications that are more likely to turn over in the first 5 years? Because maybe they're younger and they're moving on to another town or something, or do we know why we have such a high turnover?
We have a general idea by doing exit interviews, and Brad Sorensen, our HR manager, he does our exit interviews for our full-time employees, and we really try to kind of get in there and try to find out why are people leaving, you know. So, for example, like Shane mentioned, for our planning department, you know, workload is an issue, but then commuting and travel was an issue for that department as well, too. So, you know, we just try to find out what's going on, and then if there are changes that we can make to help promote longevity.
How many, in the course of the last 12 months left due to money? Finding something higher paying somewhere else?
You know, Brad, you can surely step in with this if you'd like, but it's my understanding the majority of it wasn't compensation per se. I think it was other issues. I think for the most part, I mean, there were some, I believe, that maybe mentioned compensation, but the majority of it was not compensation.
But people rarely leave a job to make less money, though.
That is correct.
I just think, again, like she said, that we have some folks that had a really long commute. You know, they took the job here and had a long commute. So it wasn't necessarily that their new job was going to pay them enough to make a difference. It was, well, I would save myself an hour a day of commute. The pay was comparable, maybe a little bit better, you know, whatever. But yeah, it's not as big of a driving factor to that. Although we do hear it, you know, we do have those conversations with staff that are, loved one's going to pay me X. What can you do? Which is why that's when we open up the benefit package and say, well, we can't pay you X, but look at these other intangibles.
And, you know, research shows also that benefits are really a close second to compensation when individuals are looking at jobs. They're not just looking at how much they're going to be paid. Their work-life balance, and especially generationally, it's important for, you know, maybe for some generations compared to others more. But, you know, that work-life balance is very important to a lot of individuals. So they look at those perks or those benefits as well.
But I think we do want to do what we need to do to retain and keep good employees. But also, I think we have to remember who pays the employee salary, which is the people in our community. And so when you look at the outlay of personnel capital of what we're expendituring, even though it's 24.1%, if you divide that by the number of employees we have, that's an average salary into the town of $111,000. Because you said we had 177 employees. When you take that and divide that, so then I also think we need to look at our benefits are twice as high as what people pay in the private sector. They're almost, if you look at some of these, some of the numbers here, they're like 40%. I mean, we've got some where there is like a salary of 46 something,
Oh, yeah.
and the benefit package is like, half that, it's
Yeah.
$27,000.
Our health insurance plan.
Yeah, and in the private sector, it's half that right now, in this marketplace, in the communities that we live. The private sector is not paying this kind of compensation in terms of benefits to their employees.
I think it'd be interesting for us to do some more research and really look at the private sector and compare to, you know, the public sector and where we're at, and we're happy to do that. It sounds like you've already done your research, but we could definitely look at that too.
And they said that state and local government benefits on average are $23,398 per job, while private sector benefits are at $10,299 per job.
Yeah, that CML just put out, didn't they? I thought CML just cited a report that.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, I think it's that fine balance that we have to
Definitely.
find. But we also need to also understand about, you know, we can't just, there's things we can't obviously do to keep every single person. And if we are having low attrition, which I would say 11%, fairly slow, but we do want to prevent losing good people, it's walking that fine line.
They said the majority are leaving, the highest percentage leave between 0 and 5 years, right?
Correct.
And in that 0 to 5 years, the average length of employment is 1.9 months.
Yes.
So that means there's
1 year, 9 months.
1 year, 9 months.
1 year now.
Yes.
So that means if I saw maybe after 6 months, after a year, I mean, that's pretty rough, I think.
Yeah.
That many, the biggest percentage group, and only employed for that period of time.
Right.
So you think what you're presenting tonight is maybe incentivizing?
I do. I think all three proposals really incentivize that. And it's, again, being competitive in the marketplace. I feel that it's really important when we look at our surrounding municipalities and, you know, what they're offering for us to, we can't be just like City of Fort Collins or City of Loveland, but, you know, we want to take some small steps to be competitive as well. So that this is an attempt to do that. Any
So
other-
is this gonna show increase in these benefits that we're looking at? That were presented to us tonight so far? So all of these benefits that we've seen today, would those go up with what is being presented here? Or is this taking into effect that?
So for like this, every existing employee would follow the vesting schedule. If you are new hires, that we start the vesting schedule with, everybody is either vested now or close to being vested.
Right, so the new list that was
So
presented
the
here,
request-
is that based on anticipation of this model? Or now if we approve some of these additional things, will this benefit column increase as well?
No, that was built in there. I'm certain of that.
I think
Carl?
Carl-
Yeah, everything was built in.
Okay.
So there was being requested tonight is reflected in
Okay.
those numbers.
Okay. This is the same information, just with a graph, again, showing the current cumulative town cost and what we're proposing. So as far as the justifications and advantages, we've talked about that, but really it's promoting and protecting the town's asset, which is, you know, the plan itself, but also our employees. And again, it is a benefit for our employees to start having the town contribute to the plan day one of hire. But also, you know, again, really looking at the retention and longevity of employee as well. So now as far as with our vacation, we did narrow down from the July 1st work session, and now we have our newly proposed. And basically, we saw that we were running a little short when we did comparisons with other municipalities, especially for the first 5 years. And so we wanted to increase, and we are increasing by 1 day or 8 hours. So you'll see currently right now, 0 to 5 years, we're doing 80 hours of vacation. For example, the first year of employment, it would be 88 hours of vacation. This graph here shows the difference. It's comparing for currently where we're at, which is the blue line, and the average of surrounding municipalities, which is the green with the red dots, and then what we're proposing. And so although we're not going to be exactly right there with the average, some years we might be right on, but you know, we're closer, and that really is our goal, to get closer and to be more competitive. Any questions on that? Okay, so our employee assistance program, you know, right now we do offer to our full-time employees, and we'd really like to extend that program to our part-time employees. We feel, again, like I said earlier, you know, our part-time employees are a big part of our workforce. Also, we've had great utilization of our EAP, 5.2% year to date. And really 5% is the goal, so we're 0.2 ahead of that. And we've actually come across some actual personnel issues where it would have been great to offer this to some of our part-time employees. And so the cost isn't that much. It's $2,615 annually, so $36.84 per employee for 71 part-time employees. And really that is to, we really want to increase the morale in the workforce and really add value to our part-time employees and have them feel more invested in the town. So that's it for my part of it. Any questions at this time? Okay, thank you.
Well, who's doing this one? I can talk about it. You want to?
Jackie, you can correct me. And I just want to make sure none of these are in our, that we're in our packet.
Now, the slides we just got, as Shane said today, we just got them done not too long ago.
So I'll be real brief. Looking here, these are our renewal rates for our workman's comp and our property casualty insurance through CIRSA. As you can see, we are facing a 38% increase in total. This is due to an increase in overall payroll and staffing audit. This is on that workman's comp side. And the client pool rate increase and the hail losses in property audit for our property casualty.
Well, and then I can tell you guys that the hail losses specifically is a pool. It serves really hard. That came out last year after the renewal, so CIRSA didn't increase rates last year because it had already gone out, and they pull millions out of the reserve. So this is basically just the hail loss that we all experienced is really the biggest reason.
That's
That's why.
everyone.
So as a government entity, is CIRSA really our only option out there? I mean, is there nobody else that can even like go out and even look to see and, you know, alternative comparisons or?
I would tell you that and the question for the people in the back is CIRSA our only option for insurance. So the very large municipalities self-insure. So like Denver, Lakewood, because they can do that, they have the resources to self-insure. Almost everybody else, CIRSA is such a better option for us than like a private. I mean, if I call up Barry and like, oh, could you insure us? He'd say, sure, let me run some numbers. But understanding we have 41 people that carry guns to work, and you
But
know,
there's not another entity out
No,
there.
no, there's no other gaming
Common
company.
who's in the marketplace giving them any.
That's right. Now, that's not exactly true. When it comes to a workers' comp, there's a company called Pinnacle. And so Pinnacle is pretty head-to-head with CIRSA. Sometimes they're less expensive, sometimes more. I've had both. I've had Pinnacle we used in my last municipality. And so I think we could take a look at it every couple of years and make sure that CIRSA, keep them honest with the pool. But when it comes to our liability, property casualty, that's it. It's CIRSA or, Barry State Farm, and good luck. to both of us. Yeah.
I will say this, from my knowledge of the hail damage in Colorado, we had exceeded Texas. Texas usually leads the nation in hail damage. In Colorado, actually had more payouts than Texas earlier this year. And so that hail damage is, for the state of Colorado, the private sector, municipalities, has affected everyone's rates.
And that is key, that is the pool.
And then workman's comp's the challenges are growing because I think you generally estimate it ahead of time and then settle up at the end of the year.
Right. In Sursa, for the workers' comp side, has been pretty stable. I mean, we haven't really seen much by the way of increases. I think this year it went up very small, but it hasn't been that fluctuating for us. And like I said, there is Pinnacle, and they, you know, they are a legitimate competitor to Sursa.
Yeah, there's another one giving Pinnacle a challenge. I don't know if, I mean, for business, I don't know if they're diving into this, but it's called Pi. And they are significantly cheaper than Pinnacle. Or Pinnacle has a side company called Cake. So that's why this new company now is named Pi. But I think, because they don't want you to feel like happy when you're life and stuff, I guess. But anyway, yeah, so, I mean, at least that's competitive in the business market for workers' comp to Pinnacle, which I have not seen for a while.
Okay, yeah, and workers' comp is a little bit easier to compete because everybody has employees and you can understand workplace injury and how that works. I think the governmental immunity side is so complex and so sophisticated that you really do need an entity like Sursa to do that right. Okay, next I think we're, okay, I'll step here for that. So this year's merit pool budget request is 3%. So that would be for all employees other than the police. The police have their 5% step plan that was adopted. I think it went into effect beginning last year. Those combined totals are just under $400,000. Again, we do have, it's part of our merit pool, so we do evaluations, and people are eligible for up to 3%. And that's that. So do you guys have any questions with the merit? Nope. Okay.
Thank you. Before we turn it over to Eric, I wanted to show this, or two slides. If you remember in 2017, we developed a fund balance requirement, requirement. So the reason I have the general fund, and we'll talk about the rec center funds, is because that's where most everything you heard tonight, that's where the funds, that money comes from. So there was some fairly large numbers flying around up there, but what I want to show you here is on the general fund here, the reserve requirement was $4.5 million. As the draft that we have here tonight, that stands, the general fund balance is looking to be about 16 million. So the green 11.5 there, that's how much we're exceeding our fund balance policy. So that's good. The other one here that I'll put up here is the Community Rec Center. The reason being that's the other fund where Eric's people and operations get paid from. You have a note, there's a note there, that asterisk at the bottom. If you're aware, we basically have two rec center funds, the original one and the most recent one. For simplicity's sake here, I just combined them and to show that we have a pretty healthy fund balance in that fund as well. So I just wanted to point that out. Like I said, we've thrown around some big numbers, but we do still have some money. So that's all I want to say here.
So with regards to that, Alice, where are we at with being able to make some early payments to get that paid off?
The next slide was walk. Make sure you went.
Okay, I'd like to see that kind of, that, I know you probably did this in this together, but at some point, where we're at with that. And
Yeah, we've got to,
also-
yeah, the payout on the regs of the debt. Yeah, we're, I promise we've got that on.
So that's a high priority that with this board and, the previous board, want to get on track with that and make sure that any of those additional revenues that we capture above and beyond goes into that debt service sooner. As soon as we can.
All right, I've got to use this mic, so before we get started, I wanted to thank my staff, Kendra, Bob, Wade, and Tara for all their hard work, and their staff under them. They've been working on the budget for probably 2 to 3 months now. And then Carl, it's been fun transitioning from Vicki to you, and me asking all the crazy questions, and I really appreciate the quick responses. Could not do it without all of them. And then just as an FYI for the board, as a reminder, last year this was 2 budget meetings. So we've combined it, kind of ripped the Band-Aid off, and we're going to combine it into one. So you get me for a little while. But I did cut 2 slides from the presentation, so we'll only have 58 slides instead of 60 from last year. So with that being said, we'll get going.
Does that mean 1 more minute?
Sure.
That's what he said all the time. He just said, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, when Dean said an hour, I was like, okay, sure. Just like last year, I wanted to share with you the philosophical approach to the budget. So everything that you'll see tonight that's in your packet in terms of operations for next year proposed reflects the town strategic plan goals. So all of those things are in there, as well as the results that we've seen in the strategic plan so far, and hopefully what will come out of it early next year when you get to adopt it, as well as some of the things we're working on in the TMP, and then the department mission and vision, which you can see on the screen above. As we go through the slides, the presentation approach that I've taken is the same as last year as well. So you're going to see kind of a recap of 2019 highlights. If there's a staffing request that Shane's already gone over, there's a slide on it as well. Just a quick look at any significant change. And significant doesn't necessarily mean monetary. It could mean just allocation of our efforts, kind of an emphasis that we might be putting in some area versus another. Then capital, just to remind you of what's out there, but I won't spend a lot of time on those. And then a financial snapshot of each division within the department. So that's kind of how that kind of lays out every slide. You've seen these 2 slides before, but I wanted to bring them up because, as I mentioned, the department strategic plan and the survey that came back, I think it's very critical to remember and recall that 91% of the community has used our parks or facilities in the last year, and 44% have also participated in a rec program in some sort. Both of those are significantly over the national average. When you add that together, we know for a fact, because we've counted people throughout the year, we will have impacted 1.5 million users. Those are people we've counted. So if you went to the park today and had a picnic, we didn't count you. These are people on trail counters, going to the rec center, at events, or registered for programs. We have physically counted them. 1.5 million people. I think that says a lot towards the fact that in Windsor, residents really do view Parks, Rec, and Culture as an essential service. So I wanted to kind of prep you as we head into each budget for each division to just remind all of us that what we do is really impactful to the community. So with that, the first budget is community events. This one is kind of interesting to just pay attention to. In that community events, it's very clear to me that Windsor loves their special events. They absolutely love concerts in the park. When you average 2,000 people, no matter what the weather is pretty much, no matter whether the band's that good or not, 2,000 people show up. So it's quite amazing to me. So these things are concerts in the park, Harvest Festival, movies in the park, farmers market, those kind of things. Forgot to push the button there. So we had 66% increase in attendance of our special events from 18 into 19, and only expect that to continue to grow. Some highlights: event sponsorship and coordinator. So last year, the board permitted us to hire an event and sponsorship coordinator. That was Lexi Spikestra. She has done a fabulous job. Kind of rode off of Tara's coattails, learned the job, and now is on her own and really is a go-getter. Really appreciate the board's support there. It has helped alleviate some stress off of Tara, as well as just continue to make sure that our events, which are our focus area, run very smoothly. We've had a lot of success in sponsorship, raised over $70,000 year to date, and thanks to Tara and Lexi, we also, as you know, signed I think it's a 4-year deal with Ehrlich Toyota for $80,000 over the next 4 years.
Well, and Eric, if I can, I just want to,
Yes.
I should have mentioned before the beginning. So this is page 43 of the packet. If you're 43 your budget, under community events for parks, so it's on page 43 of 113 of your electronic packet.
Sure. Thank you for that. I do want to jump in as I switch department or divisions. Had 89 special events this year. Summer concerts, as I said, continue to see a big increase. Farmers Market saw a slight decline, but as you saw in the strategic plan survey, Farmers Market is what people want. So we will, as you'll see in the next slide, we're going to do a better job marketing Farmers Market. So as you might recall in that conversation, I think some people don't think we have one, even though we do. So we need to just do a better job in that area. So some changes: sound costs are going to increase. Rec Mobile van, that's been very popular. It's our van that travels around to different parks and at special events. Some of that equipment's kind of getting worn out, so we're going to replace some of it. And then increase in fireworks costs. So this is something that I do think we should discuss, in the fact that fireworks are going up across the country because of tariffs that are going on. We spent $31,000 last year. We've budgeted $50,000. We don't know a number yet, but we are expecting to see an increase. That's happening to everybody. So this is for 4th of July fireworks. So we've added $19,000 there, so we're expecting to see some semblance of an increase. And that isn't to get a better show, that is to get the same show we've been getting. And that's just based on market costs that are happening everywhere. And then lastly, as I mentioned, farmers markets improvements. Before I go beyond that, any questions on fireworks? I think that one to me is a significant jump. Nothing. I feel like you had a question, Paul.
Did you expect us to have a question about fireworks?
I thought you might.
We thought it'd be incendiary. So.
Been working on that one, I think.
Yeah, he has. So then the next slide, the mayor had asked me to during the capital meeting to bring a slide on the events that we've been running especially in terms of partnerships. So as you can see on this slide, it's a little hard to see, so I'll kind of read it for you. But the town-sponsored events, those are the ones like Harvest Festival or Wine Fest, where some entity has come to this board and asked to support via waiving of park fees or waiving of some fee. And so what the board has done is give them a thumbs up, and then we bill them, then the board reimburses for that cost. So we had 15 of those this last year, and that total was $28,150 that the board had basically reimbursed fees because that entity came here. All of those people up here all came to this board, came to the town board 3 years ago. So they're due to come back through our group that we have. We have a special events group that will meet, They'll come to ask us and make a renewal if they want to, or they may not. And then we will bring that to the board. I would expect to do that probably in early January, just because you will need to know whether you're going to approve or not, and we will need to know in terms of scheduling their event. And then there's one more that's a year out. This is the pause for sneakers. So these up here are the ones that I said are $28,150. So wanted to follow up on your request to show those events.
And I also want some specific info just on Harvest Fest too, where our numbers, you know.
In terms of,
Just in terms of numbers, what you think attendance was, like on a Saturday night versus.
okay,
I mean, if you guys count that
Sure.
versus parade
absolutely.
versus that utility in Main Park.
Sure.
And get an idea, like, because I've heard from a lot of folks that said that thought we were down this year.
Mhm.
And I'm just, so if we have some numbers like that, it's kind of.
We'll get you some numbers. Anecdotally, I think the days in Main Park was super hot. It was 100 some degrees. People didn't stay all day. So,
Sales were about the same. They
but-
just submitted their sales tax to their accountant that does it for them, and sales were
There you go.
about equal as much.
which is pretty good given the fact it was hot.
It was hot, and they cleared out by 3 on Monday.
When you said that they're gonna come back before us though, before.
They will come to the group. It's like, for example, if you need a specific one to come, what we're trying to do by having that group come back, come to our group, our internal staff group, is to not bring 10, 15 people to you over the course of 1 or 2 meetings. So what we will do is have them come to our staff group, and then the staff will bring you a
Well,
recommendation.
the last time Harvest Fest Committee came to us was because they wanted a significant increase, I think, the main band, and they wanted like an extra 10 or 15,000.
It was 13.
13.
You're right, yeah.
Correct.
And I don't know if they're making some decisions right now, if they're gonna bring in a big name band in the future, or stick with a local band, which seems to draw more crowds and more local people. When you bring in the Nashville band, nobody, unless you're a country follower, really knows who they are. So they're just kind of making some of those decisions about toning it down a little bit.
Well, and I guess just kind of with this conversation, you know, when you look at that list, it may make sense to have Harvest Fest come directly to the board, because it is such a marquee event and such a big amount, you know.
I think we should have at least a work session separate about Harvest Fest, separate from all the other events. 'Cause
Sure.
It is our key, biggest event. And then maybe they come in, I don't know, as part of that or after
Right.
that or something. But yeah, I would agree that we need to kind of look at that separately.
Yeah, because we've got like $28,000 and 25 is Harvest Fest, so we could probably single them out. Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
So before I get to your question, to your point of 28,000, I would like to remind you though that the 28,000 is just what you're reimbursing. That is not counting staff time for not only the Parks, Rec, and Culture Department, Public Works, and PD. So there's more to that cost than just 28. That's just the reimbursement number. Dr.
Any sponsored events, do you draw up individual contracts with them? For instance, early, they have their cars down at the rec center, for sale. Do they get so many days a year to do that, or how does
You want to
that
talk
work?
to that agreement?
Yeah, so that was supposed to just be over the summer, so they should be reviewing those shortly. So we do have a specific agreement that we work with Ian, the town attorney, on, with all of what early kids been trained for that 80,000 over the 4 years. So yeah, there's different, agreements with our information screens, and then maybe to pick like 4 or 5 special events, obviously we pick the summer concert series and like a handful of farmers markets, and then go off the agreements with other events. So they kind of handpick which of our, we kind of have a list of different special events and activities that they're able to go to.
Is it possible to estimate the other costs associated with these?
Absolutely.
As when we're looking at this
Yes, absolutely.
again, so that we know what the true kind of value
Kind of
of what we're
the staff
looking
costs.
at?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We do have like the Optimus Club has their duck race at $425, it kind of seems high. Well, that's not just it's the rental of the trail that they use from 15th to 11th Street. It's the cost that's associated with the marquee board that's on Main Street. So those costs aren't just for like parking deck. Wine Festival is charged for one parks person. If we have to close these streets down, then those, Public Works has to
does that?
Well, no, I mean, if it's like
It's kind of
har,
wash, but doesn't it come out of the tank?
no, like, so like Harvest Fest would be, you know, the police department pays a lot of overtime, Parks pays overtime and just works, so it comes out of the departmental budgets. If there's a direct contribution from the town board, if in addition to this, if Harvest Fest says we would like $10,000 directly for our event, that comes out of the board budget. But these other things, a lot of the staffing, those hidden costs, are just in the departmental budget.
So the 13,000, I don't know, I think that's probably still the number that goes to the Harvest
For the-
Fest for the band.
the band, that's-
Does that come out of ours, then, or does that come out of?
That comes out of yours,
Okay.
correct.
And then the other, whatever that other 12 grand is of other stuff goes according to whatever it
Right.
is identified as.
Yeah, so I don't think we do any of the key reimbursements, we don't do those out of the board's annual contributions, do we? Are those reflected
Yes.
there? They are, so if we do
Yes.
any reimbursements that go back,
Correct.
that comes out of the board's annual
Correct.
contributions.
If these events require, let's say, PD to have overtime hours, et cetera, and that comes out of their budget, does Rick put in extra, overtime into his budget? I mean, does he, add in extra? cushion?
I think all these events, staff is anticipating these things now, so they've been built in over time. And there's plenty of room in Rick's budget, I promise.
Isn't that the truth?
No, but they've been built in over time, so probably the first year, when these things happen, staff gets caught a little bit off guard and didn't know it, but now these events have been going for so long, I think they're just kind of reflected in that operational request.
Well, not only just PD, but I mean, even Parks and Rec,
Yeah.
I mean, do you budget in overtime hours, I guess, is what I'm getting at? Is that a
Yes.
separate?
For-
line item?
Shane's spot on, for the ones that we're aware of. So if someone walked in the door next week, new, and you approved it, and we didn't know about it, then we would just eat that in this year's budget, but we would know that it's coming for the next 2 years.
What
And
I'm
then
saying
take
is
it
you
from
might eat it, but you haven't budgeted in, that's what I'm getting at. You have budgeted in overtime hours into your overall budget.
Yes.
For
Yes.
the slush fund of an event that comes up, that's what I'm.
Well, no, not for events that we're not anticipating. The overtime budget is basically there for what we anticipate for these special events. So again, if the board approved an event and we had to work park staff on an additional Saturday, we probably have built that in. If the board approved another event that looks similar to Harvest Fest, we haven't built that into the budget because there's so much time and so much staff in there, so.
PD actually, like Wine Fest, due to some situations that happened in 2018, for 2019, we required a certain longer security to be there. The PD billed them the overtime. for
Oh,
that. So
good,
that's
good,
what they did.
all
So
right, good.
So that, the other money, they pay it, but it goes back to general fund. That's how the overtime budget we did that. So it goes back to the, it is what it is.
Okay. So kind of the financial review slide for community events, you can see there's 52,000 in sponsorships, 21,000 in fees and registration, so it's a small increase of 3,600 in revenue. We'll run the same exact events, and basically there's a slight increase of about 6% in terms of the budget on the expenditure side, and that really is fireworks, sound, and rec mobile van. So, any questions on events before we move to the next? So the next one is recreation. What page is that on?
Yeah, so that is on page 44 of your electronic packet, and that's it starts right at the bottom with recreation expenditures.
So recreation programming continues to grow, and you'll see that in a second here. So basketball, 10% growth year over year. Soccer, 10%. And let me pause on soccer for just a second. I started in 2015. We had 900 kids in soccer. 4 years later, we have 1,800. I mean, literally an entire new program almost in 4 years. It's crazy. And to see 10% again, it goes to the field space issue that we have for many sports. So if any of you have bought a new house with a big yard and we can practice there, let me know.
And Eric, that it does, I think, because I've had the question come up as far as sustainability in these programs. You know, we get as a parent, I get that email every 3 months. Hey, look, you signed your kid up for this program. We need help. You know, and then, you know, we're practicing baseball on football fields. We've got, you know, doing soccer on baseball fields. And so at what point are we going to hit that natural place where we just say we can't add any more? I mean, you know, are we capping programs if we hit that point as a community, or?
I think we're close until we have more fields to play on. And then I'm trying to remember, we were just talking today, Tara, if you remind me, there was a sport that Jay turned, is it lacrosse or flag, or maybe it was football, we turned away a team or two because we didn't have coaches. We had an extra, I forget the sport, but there were, to your point, we asked for coaches all the time.
Well,
We couldn't get it.
A couple weeks ago
Yeah.
that we didn't have any coaches.
Yeah.
So that's the question I was to raise. I mean, what drives this? You know, obviously, we have a lot of parents, but if people don't step up to coach.
Correct. We don't, staff's not coaching teams, so it is truly, that's the volunteer side where if we don't have parents step up and coach, then, you know, we will have to make some decisions. It happens across the country in terms of having to, sometimes you don't have to beg, sometimes you do, and we try to incentivize the best we can to get people, but it is a challenge running right alongside field space. I don't know the answer to your question, but it is things that we're paying attention to.
Well, and I would just pose for the board, I think the first probably policy and philosophical cap should probably be when we're at that point, we probably need to make this a Windsor only, you know, rec programming. I mean, I know we get kids from outside of Windsor, and I think if we're gonna have to put a hard cap in and say we can't grow our programs anymore, we probably need to be a little bit more, you know, look more internal.
If we get to that point, yes.
Do we know what percentage of our programs have our Windsor kids versus?
So
Terry,
most of our programs are 85% to 90% Windsor kids, except for youth basketball.
Right.
City of Fort Collins doesn't start their youth basketball program until 4th grade typically. And what we're seeing is that all those folks from Southeast Fort Collins, basketball is about 60% Windsor kids. And some of our, we'll call it power to play teams, our like intermediate teams, we actually now require that 60% of those kids live in the well-guarded core schools in order to, since we do utilize Severance Middle and Rangeview so heavily, that their team roster has to show that 60% are well-guarded core students before we let them play in our league. I would say all the athletics, yes, we can extend soccer to go past 2 o'clock. We can play games, you know, until 5 o'clock on a Saturday. But the one that we're probably going to have to cap here, and where we just talked, because we just had a deadline for girls basketball, is we probably won't take those kids off the wait list. We typically try really hard to get those 20, 30, 40 kids. Parents, we missed a deadline. In the future, moving forward, just with we're getting kicked out of the schools more and more. Their clubs are growing and they're doing more and more. So gym space is, I would say, the biggest capacity issue immediately, where yes, fields, we can play. We're taking over all the neighborhood parks. We've got Windsor West is a soccer complex now. Highland up on the hill, we're using that as a soccer field. Definitely taking over we're eyeing Clear Valley REA. We think that'd be a great partnership to use their big green space right there. We need like space that has an acre of turf. We're moving over it right now.
Seems like parking is an issue, like in Eastman, you know, I see the overflow parking on Saturdays, so besides fields, just accommodating all the cars is a challenge.
It is, and you'll see, as we did talk a couple weeks ago on CIP, remind you tonight, with the Eastman Park project proposal, there's parking in that as well. I think we'll cover that tomorrow night too.
And the board will hear tomorrow night, because I know we're talking about capital for the Eastman Park proposal specifically. Eric broke out a slide that shows everything that's new that wasn't in the original master plan, and then each element, and one of those is parking in there. And I think even though it wasn't an originally perceived concept, is probably, if we only did one thing next year, it would probably be parking in Eastman, because you're right, Barry, it is. The Catholic Church is programming more and more our use of that parking lot. And again, they've been really gracious in letting us use that parking lot. But there are times when their own parishioners can't get in because of our events. And, you know, I'm hearing from residents that get, you know, ticketed for parking on the street. So we don't have any parking there, but they're getting ticketed on the street. So it's a big issue at Eastman.
It is. Some other sports, this one actually isn't a sport, although I would argue if you go attend on a Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday or Friday, you would find out that it is. Senior lunch, so we did add a day at some point this year, but that's up over 40%, so we will easily crack 10,000 senior meals served in a year. That's quite impressive. And the piece that kind of always pulls at my heartstring when I see it every day is, you know, we live in an affluent community, but I watch every day, we always over-order food, and every day there are seniors that walk out of there with an extra plate. And I know that they're not taking it just because, they're taking it because they need it. So those people are getting 4 good meals a day that we know, or a week that we know of, and then most of them are probably also taking a meal home. So very important program, I think, in terms of service that we're providing for people to make sure that they're eating good, at least one good meal most of the days of the week.
What's that cost us here?
We just provide the facility, say donation only, and it goes to the county.
Is it like a county or a grant?
Yeah, is it the area on agency? Yeah, so every county administers the area on aging food program.
They ask
Yeah.
for a voluntary, it used to be $3.
It's
Free,
$3,
$2 to $3.
and if you're under 65, it's like
They
$7.
don't, if they can't pay it, they're not required to pay it, but it's asked.
And I would encourage you, if you want to just pop in one day to eat with them, it's a lot of fun. I do it every now and then, especially around football season, and rag on all the Bronco fans, wear my
Hey.
Steeler hat. It's a lot of fun.
We're trying to encourage them to come.
I'll tell you some stories afterwards
Oh,
about what
okay.
they tell me. So then senior programming is also up 8%. The one that is down is football. It's down 5% overall. It's all because of tackle football and the concussions. Flag football is going through the roof. It's compensating for the downturn in tackle football, but overall, when you combine the two, we're down 5% one year to the next.
And that's a pretty consistent trend, right?
That's a consistent trend. It really hasn't impacted Windsor. It's been a trend for probably 5 years nationwide. It hasn't really impacted us until last year. We saw a little drop. This year we saw a bigger drop. So it's kind of like we're catching up with the national trend in decreasing tackle football. So it'll be interesting to pay attention to that and how football in general across the nation survives. And there's lots of things out there that people are doing. And then the last one that I'm going to show to you is 14% increase in baseball. So obviously you can see that our sports programs are not slowing up at all. So the next slide kind of is a summary of chart changes that we're expecting that you can see in the budget is expected increase in referee or official costs. And I'm not sure if you read the paper recently, and this is the nationwide trend. Umpires and officials, you can't find them. The people that were older that did it are retiring out, and there's not a lot of youth coming into the activity, into the job field, and a lot of it is the way they're treated by fans. When you get accosted during a game, after a game, sometimes before the game even started, why do you want to do it? And so there was a big article in the Trib, I think yesterday, if you want to check it out, but we are seeing that, and so we're fully expecting to see a pay request from our sports officials group, but quite honestly, I don't know that money will solve the problem. So, the other thing that we've got going on is we've found with the wages that we're paying seasonal employees for concessions, the concession business is no longer a business to be in, at least for us, so we're going to look to contract out concessions at Chimney Park Pool and the ball field there. We will keep concessions at Boardwalk just because of boat rentals and that kind of thing. So, and as you're aware, the Future Legends Group already is doing concessions at Diamond Valley, so we will be down to just one concession stand next year. Yes.
I almost hate to ask this question, but go back to the officiating.
Yes.
Crowd control, 900% of all people are really good, we got 1%. Are other communities getting in a situation where they need less security at U of L place?
I'm not aware of any. We've not had a lot of problems because we have field supervisors or site supervisors, and they've typically been able to kind of break it up before it gets bad. I think that while that costs us money to run the program, it's been a good thing because we're able to kind of catch things before they escalate. I can tell you places that I've been and other places that I've seen where they don't have a site supervisor, things can escalate and then it becomes a police issue. We don't have a ton of it, but it is something we have to pay attention to because it, you know, for whatever reason, parents are that way.
So our supervisors are looking at crowd control,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously they have some training in de-escalation.
Yeah, they do their best to de-escalate, and then if they need PD, they'll call them, or you know, there's typically, and we might have 1 or 2, 3 incidents a year, but nothing that we're worried about like having on-site security yet.
Right, and it's still like that kind of the older, right? Like
It is.
That 12, 14 age group.
It is, but I will tell you, I remember in North Carolina, I had this has been 8 years ago, so before the kind of trend got really bad, but I've had mom punch a coach in the parking lot after a game, and the coach punch her back, and have to call the cops, and you know, so it does happen at the youth level as well. So the other thing I wanted to mention is we've not made a budget change in terms of what we're doing in terms of staffing or maintenance for Diamond Valley or future Legends as we sit today because we don't know what the impact's going to be. January 1, they take over maintenance. You'll see later the charge that will be, and we're going to cut them a $24,000 check at the beginning of the year at some point during the year. But I actually meet with that group on Thursday to kind of get into the details because in the original agreement, there's not a lot of down in the weeds kind of discussions about, well, who's painting a field, who's changing out the bases, who's doing X, Y, Z. It just says maintenance. So we're going to dive into that. But this budget does not reflect any reduction in what we're currently doing until we see how they do and if their standard of care is the same as what our standard of care is currently at that site.
So I think it's fair to say in a year, we would anticipate that would be reduced. But again, not knowing what that amount is, we would just be making it up at this point, so.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. I hope
Yeah.
that we can come back and go, hey, the agreement worked perfectly and we can reduce our budget by X. But we need to, it's kind of, let's wait and see through next year.
So let me recap what you're saying here. You expect that the new owners or the Boulevard aren't going to be able to take care of the facility and that we're going to have to do it for them?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think there's not a deep explanation. Like, for example, it says maintenance. So we cut the grass 2, sometimes 3 times a week. If their expectation was to cut it once, the grass won't be short enough for us. The agreement that we've signed doesn't say you're going to cut the grass 3 times a week and in this direction and that kind of detail that we do today. So we need to kind of work that out, and I have my first meeting with the group on Thursday to kind of begin that discussion because January 1's coming, and they're well aware of that. And then last up here on the screen, there are no fee increases as we sit today and reflected in the budget in terms of rec programs. That said, we completed ePrep Solutions, which you remember that's our software that gets into cost recovery, about a month and a half. Staff has been working hard learning the software, analyzing data, and so we will be working on that throughout the rest of this year and into next year, probably well into next year. And as we see changes that need to be made, we'll go ahead and make them. But as of today, I can't tell you that there will be any increase in any program fee. I would expect there'll probably be some changes, but I couldn't tell you them to reflect it in this budget.
Because of this, didn't it show there was a deficit in the Parks and Rec? For the Parks and Rec facility, currently there was a deficit of like 33 or something.
Oh, no, that was for the
So the rec center has two funds. We have the original
Right.
fund and we have the expansion. Because there are separate ballot issues, we account for those separately in the budget. And so when you look at the original CRC, there is a deficit, but I would say it's not really there, because when you combine it with our expansion budget and overall budget, we have a huge surplus. So there isn't really.
But you can't mix the expansion,
No, we can-
expansion piece have to go to pay for the.
It does, but it's just saying that our reserves in the rec center fund are below your policy. But we have plenty of money in reserves between expansion and the CRC. So we are, that, it's not really deficit, it's just showing that the amount that we have is a carry forward fund balance is below your 20% policy.
Correct.
But you did call it a deficit in this.
Well, yeah, well, I'm sorry.
That's why I call it a
Right.
deficit.
Yeah, well, it was like surplus deficit, yeah, so it's not really, I wouldn't call it a true deficit, it's just we have to account for them separately. And the second part of this is I want to work with bond counsel and see if we can restructure it, because I think that with the way that we comply with the ballot language right now is correct, but from an accounting standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense when we're showing part of the fund is, doesn't have our fund balance, the other one has this huge surplus. So I've talked to Dean and Carl a little bit and Eric about conceptually how I think we could do it, but I just want to run it by some bond counsel to make sure that we don't violate that ballot language. But I think we can account for it differently, and so anyway, so that was just for the rec center itself. That wasn't any other recreation
Correct. So,
fund.
yeah, this fund is a general fund account.
Here.
Yes.
Back up a little bit on baseball, I think it was 14% a couple slides ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, what percentage of that is, like, adults, like softball is probably in there as well?
No, actually, that is just youth.
Okay, this is just youth.
Yeah.
What about, so that does include, youth? What if girls softball, do they have the same opportunities as boys to play baseball? And I think, if we go back like 10 years, like, I think if we had a girls softball team, we'd have to go play in, like, Greeley under the youth league.
So-
Because we didn't have offerings here.
I'm glad you pointed that out. The picture shows baseball. That number is baseball and softball, youth combined.
Okay.
I can get you the breakout, or Tara's probably looking it up, in terms of girls and boys of baseball and softball. But that really is that should have been a baseball/softball photograph. It is both.
Okay.
It was. Great question. So then your financial screenshot of recreation. There is a it results in a $70,000 decrease, and that really is concessions contracting out. So that's why it's decreasing in terms of revenue. And then there is about an $18,000 increase, or 1%, and that really is personnel costs. So that's what the change is there. And then this is the first time you're going to see this little bullet underneath. It really isn't in operations and maintenance, but if you look at the budget in its totality, there are some of our budgets within Parks, Rec, and Culture that there's a marked increase for IT transfer, and it's based upon the way they are accounting for their services and how they charge it back to the different departments. So this is the first time you'll see it. So when you see it in other slides, I wanted to explain to you what that is. It's not necessarily, if you just look at operations and maintenance, it's not reflecting in my percentages. It's in the overall budget of that division.
And we've always charged the IT tech transfer. Historically, they've done it based on kind of call volume and tickets. So if somebody puts in a work order, they call IT and they come, they divvied it up that way. This year they've simplified it some, maybe just on devices, just number of laptops, iPads, in phones, whatever it is, and basically attributed the cost that way. So some departments will see their costs go up, some departments will see them go down. In the end, it's really going to be the same to the IT department, it's just the way we're charging those out internally. So Jess, do you have anything else to add?
And it also includes, things like licenses and different applications per department, because each department has specific software that requires year or annual costs as well. And that might be a little bit of the difference between department and department too.
Okay. Any questions on recreation before I move? Then the next one's aquatics. I'll look up what page that is.
Well, the IT one in 2020 budgets, I'm looking at that right, though, it's a huge.
It's $38,000.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's just how we're charging it internally. I mean, when we go over IT, you'll see the overall cost for IT, but it's
Well,
just,
yeah, we've always tracked it there,
Right.
but it's just, it's like a huge increase, 2020 versus 2018.
Kurt, do we do
For
background checks
2019,
on?
it was 30,000, it's 96,000.
Do we do
Right,
background
yeah,
checks
so-
on realtors
Yes, absolutely.
and annual?
That is done through our department. We have a, what's the name of it?
SSCI, it's owned by ESPN and it's sponsored by our national foundation or National Revenue Funds Association. And we were a charter agency, signed on like 15 years ago, weren't able to use it, just due to some changes. And then just about 4 years ago, made that shift and we spent, I think it's $17 a volunteer on an annual basis that we do the charter.
That's our expense. right?
Yep, and that's put back in the recreation budget. It used to be a component of the human resources budget, but then 3 years ago, we transferred that into the recreation operations budget.
so, we're on open space and trails?
No,
Or no, we're on
aquatics.
aquatics. Okay. Okay, so aquatics is on page 45 of your packet?
So aquatics had a really good year, especially given three factors. One was a little bit shorter summer than normal from the school, several weather events, and then blue-green algae. And so when I click through the kind of percentages here, the big decrease that's up there is daily non-motorized rentals, and that probably was the big hit for the blue-green algae, where we were closed for 10 days, so we lost 10 days of revenue right in the heat, kind of peak of the summer, so that didn't help. But non-motorized permits were up 36%, so those are annual. Daily is what I just mentioned, down 60%. Attendance at Chimney Park Pool actually was up 14%, which is pretty good. And then just under 2,000 people to date have learned how to swim. So again, another successful year for aquatics. Kind of the changes that you see in the budget, and quite frankly, it's all based upon so the WIBIT operationally is in the budget as we sit today, and they're going to talk about it again tomorrow. But that is in there. It does reflect a normal summer and no blue-green algae. So hopefully we won't have that back to back or never again. And then I left this last one. We talked about it last year. We had an initiative in 2019 to try to offer free swim lessons to every resident of Windsor that is in 3rd grade. We really struggled getting that off the ground after some discussions with the school and the teachers. So we're not going to get it off the ground this year, but we were going to continue that effort and work to try to get that done next year. So you'll see that as well in terms of next year's budget. But I wanted to let you know that we didn't do it this year. We're still talking and trying to figure it out so that we can make sure that we offer that basic life skill of swimming, so that if you fall in a ditch or a pond or a swimming pool or whatever, you can get out and survive that. So, any questions on that? So capital for this one is the WIBIT. I won't go into details, you're aware of it, other than to remind you that I believe it'll pay itself back in 4 years, lifespan's 10. It really will help reduce the general fund cost of aquatics overall over the course of the lifespan of the WIBIT.
Eric, how big of a footprint on the lake is that going to take up based upon whatever model you're budgeting now?
I have to look that up off the top of my head. I don't remember. It's not that big.
About halfway through the swim beach, I can show, they did aerial.
Yeah.
I was just curious, like a square foot.
Yeah, I can find that. I'll get you that in the morning. I can't remember, call it off the top of my head. It really isn't some massive structure.
Just curious.
Yep. And then financially, you can see the revenue increase is about 76% or up $153,000. So basically, it's the WIBIT. And then on the expenditure side, $70,000 or 20% increase, and that also is pretty much the WIBIT with a little bit of staff increase. So you can see the difference right in year one, if that happens to be passed. Any questions on aquatics? Okay, next one's art and heritage. What page is that?
Yeah, that is on page 48, 48 of your packet.
Okay. Art and Heritage Division continues to shine. About 3 years ago, we made a big emphasis to focus on programming, to take the artifacts that we have. You remember we made a big change in the Boardwalk Park Museum and the depot, and kind of allowed people to touch and see and feel and use the things that we have in our collections, as opposed to just walking in and reading a sign. That decision, looking back, was probably one of the better decisions we've made, especially for Art and Heritage Division, because they, again this year, for 3 years in a row now, will have surpassed the previous year in terms of attendance for programs and events that they run. They'll crack over 10,000 people this year, and really, quite frankly, given the current space that they're in, they're probably maxed, and why they're hoping to see the Creamery get online sooner rather than later. So you know, that really is the big winner for us. Is Art and Heritage has this huge upside. We've seen it in the change that we made 3 years ago, and it's just trajectory for that group has been really good. This is the first slide. You'll see the proposed staffing. I won't spend a lot of time on it because Shane has already covered, but we are proposing to take one 28-hour employee up to 40. So that's an impact of about 51,000, and then to add one 19-hour employee. The big reason here is twofold: programming, and the other is, since I've been here 4 years, Caitlin, who is our curator, so her job is to really spend a lot of time with artifacts and to work with them and work on some exhibits and that kind of thing. Because of the programming emphasis, she's not spent a lot of time there. And the Art and Heritage second floor is a difficult workspace with lack of capacity, et cetera, et cetera. With the new museum collections facility coming online February of next year, Caitlin can actually do what we hired her to do 5 or 6 years ago, which is be a curator. So there's a loss there in terms of programming, because now Caitlin's going to do what we hired her for and what her expertise is. Her expertise isn't programs, it is curation. So she'll be able to focus there in that workspace. So that is the big reason why we want to take one of the part-time year-round positions and bump it up to full-time, and then backfill a little bit with a 19-hour employee so that we can really focus on programming in the Creamery. That facility, in terms of the programs there, really help allow them to continue the growth that we've seen in the last 3 years. So some changes you're going to see in the budget. There's moving expenses to package it up. We're going to do all of that ourselves. Put it on a moving truck. So this is the stuff in the second floor, and probably some of the things in the Eaton House, and moved over to the new building at some point early the first quarter of next year. Putting UV film on the Boardwalk Park Museums. That's what BWPM stands for. So that the sunlight doesn't damage the artifacts any more than they already have in the building. Curator focus on artifacts, which is what I already mentioned. And then when the Creamery comes online, the programming emphasis. It's really interesting. You know, we just showed all the growth on sports, and you'll see growth in the rec center, and just growth in terms of people using our parks. There's a large contingent of people in Windsor who want arts. Those kind of things. I almost said crafts, Wade, and I looked at you and I didn't. But arts and the programs that they're running is very important to a large part of our community as well. So we're really looking forward to the Creamery coming online. Capital slide here, just things you've already seen. You'll discuss again tomorrow, but I wanted to remind you of them. Creamery, museum and storage comes online. And then the Eaton House construction, turning that into a business incubator. Again, prime real estate for that to happen right there at the Eaton House. So the financial review for Art and Heritage. Fees and charges, are up about $15,000, $16,000, about 33%. And quite frankly, that's contingent on the creamery. Those are all programs run creamery, and then some out of Art and Heritage as well. You can see the personnel, the expenses for Art and Heritage as well, increase of $150,000 or 40%, and those are personnel, the moving costs, and then the contractual piece is really a wash. So we're going to contract out with several folks to run programs in the creamery. If the program goes, we'll have an expense, and we'll have in terms of paying them, but we'll have generated all that money. We'll actually make money by running those programs contractually, much like what we do in some of our fitness classes and those kind of things at the rec center. And then again, you see an IT transfer on this slide. So any questions on Art and Heritage? Yes, sir.
Bringing the creamery online, what is that total bottom line? What's between staffing and programming?
So the construction is $300,000. I think there is, and I'm going, Terry, you jump in if I'm wrong. I think there's about $100,000 in what I'll call FF&E, just to put the chairs, tables, that that stuff in the building, and then the staffing cost that you see.
So part-time staff was the employee that would assist as a part-time to keep the doors open for those like open makerspace type of.
That 28 to 40 hour position?
No, it actually is like a thing.
It's the 19th, the 19th position. You were gonna say something?
No.
No.
You guys all said it before I could speak, so that's perfect.
Any other questions? Okay. Next is Community Rec Center. What page is that on?
Well, that'd be special fund. I'm even there.
Okay. So Rec Center, I'll just keep going through this while Shane's looking. I think it's pretty deep in the packet because it's a special fund.
Yeah.
7,540 members as of last week. As you can see the breakdown here, 14% increase year over year.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Go
it
ahead.
starts out on page 68 is the Community Rec Center Fund.
So let me back up a second. Like Dean, I'm gonna discuss these funds. There are two funds, CRC and CRCX, but I'm gonna discuss them basically as one, just to kind of make the conversation clear, but know that we do keep separate funding. So 14% increase in 2019 that we've seen so far. To give you an example, in 2018, we saw a 19% increase. This is gonna be the end of year 3 that we've been open. So it's really good. Now we have 3 years of data. We can really make some very accurate, I would think, very accurate assumptions and proposals in terms of running the rec center. 80%, which is kind of where we've been the entire time we opened, 80% are Windsor residents. And what's really interesting, and you see this on this next slide, but we are projecting, we've had 300,000 visitors so far through September. We have 3 months to go. And if you look at this slide, these 3 months, we've now trajectory up. Last November, we had 42,000. So if you add that up, that's 111,000 people. So if you add 111 to 300, we are expecting to see about 410,000 bodies through the door in 2019. That's a lot of folks. So it's part of how we get to 1.5 million impacted. So I wanted to share with you that. So on this slide, you can kind of see the comparison 3 years. And then this is, I really put this in here for David, so I hope he's watching on TV. This one is really what we look at every month. This is a chart where you can see that in 2017 when we opened, this is what we thought we were going to do in revenue, and you can see we beat that every month. In 2018 and 19, this is what we thought we were going to do on a monthly basis, and we pretty much beat it every month. And you can tell where our revenue drops is August and September, the best weather, right before school starts, everybody's on vacation, everybody's in the mountains, and we know that as a business, that's the drop. and then we expect to see it jump back up over here. To date, we're this is through September, we're $112,000 over the baseline. So we know that if Dean says, how are you doing? We know we're doing good. We're gonna meet our number and exceed it. In next year's budget, this line, because we have 3 years of data, is gonna go up a little bit. So I think it goes to 1.5 million, you divide that by 12 and you get your monthly line. But again, my point here is the rec center continues to see increases. Typically nationwide, rec centers kind of plateau after 3 years. I don't think that's gonna happen given the growth of this community. So we are starting to pay attention to things like capacity and that kind of stuff. So wanted to share that with you. Where are our members located? So this is GIS put this together, take all of our data, and we could zoom in down to the street level if we need to market to areas where we don't have a lot of people, or go run specials in certain areas of the community if we needed to, but we haven't needed to given the growth we have. But you can see that we really are pretty widespread with a heavy emphasis inside of Windsor. That's the 80% of residents. Some highlights, classes, pickleball is crazy. If we would allow the pickleball folks to take over the whole rec center, they would. It is an amazing field in terms of sports. Personal training continues to increase. We now have 3 personal trainers. They're all doing really well. It's fun to see. Yes, sir.
I had somebody come up to me today, speaking of pickleball, and ask why the outdoor courts aren't lit.
We chose that when we built the courts because, quite frankly, we call Main Park a community park. I would argue, and I think it may change, knock on wood, that it changes in our strategic plan, that it is a neighborhood park. It is surrounded by homes. And I think if we lit that court, I would guess that the neighbors would be livid. And so that is why we chose when we built it not to light it. And I would be very hesitant to come to this board and say we would like to light it because of that reason. So you can see here, personal training's gone up, fitness classes gone up. The only thing that's decreased is room rentals, and we're going to begin to study that now. That could be a capacity issue. It could be a lack of marketing issue. It could be pricing issue. It could be an experience issue. We don't know that. Probably my gut is it's probably a capacity issue, but we're gonna look at that for staff and challenge them to look at that and make changes if we need to next year. So yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This isn't a major budget issue, but it's an issue I've had ever since we opened the rec center, and it's still not fixed.
What's that?
The water is terrible. When I have my coffee with the mayor there, and we have pictures of water, it tastes funny. I get complaints from people who have to drink the water. I've been complaining about it for 3 years. Even if I have my coffee with the mayor, we have to have bottled water. I don't know.
We'll check. I will tell you that.
The problem is, but it's been like that from day one, and I don't know if it's because we don't run. I don't know if we don't run it enough through there, or.
So let me do this. When the next time you have one, because I will tell you that normally when I get a water complaint, and I've had them, I haven't had them in almost 2 years. And most of the time they came from Rotary. No one has told me about it. If you have another one, please let me know so we can look at it, because we'll go check it now. But at the same time, if you have one, we need to look at it that day.
Yeah, I don't know.
So let me know.
You guys get it from the kitchen or the sink right there.
It's coming from the kitchen probably.
So I don't know what the issue is, but every time I have water there.
Sure.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like, if it's first thing in the morning and just running the pipes and just having all the
Could
water
be, I
sit
don't
in the
know.
pipes overnight.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe just,
Almost as a tax issue.
Could be. I don't know. We'll look at it.
Yeah,
But like I said,
it's a very small issue.
Yeah, but I'm glad you mentioned it.
Last time
Okay.
we had it there.
let me know, because if it happens to any of you, let me know, because we can look at it that day as well. We'll also check it out. It must be the source of where it's coming from. I drink out of the little bottle fillers all day long.
But are you drinking out of the fountain? Do you fill it in the fountain?
I fill it out of the water filler that's in the wall.
Yeah, so that might be filtered better than when it comes comes from when you're filling a pitcher, because that's the only time I've had it.
Okay.
I don't notice it from the drinking fountains. It seems like it's when we're filling a pitcher for some reason, or I mean, I don't know if it's the ice. I don't know what it is.
Okay, we'll check on
Other
that.
issue.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for letting us know.
Well, and let somebody with actual taste buds try it, Eric. I don't want you to.
Was somebody with good taste? Is that
Oh. Can't win for losing.
I mean, nobody's arguing with me. I'm not.
So, this next slide, really, quite frankly, there's no major changes expected in the rec center in either fund. We're doing really well. I expect that to continue. I will say, and you can see on the slide here, there are no changes, but we are looking, and now that we have ePrep, we are diving into, and we will get to the rec center within the next probably 3/4 of a year to understand better the business and whether we need to make changes in terms of fees or classes that we offer or rentals, as I mentioned earlier. All of that. We know that behind the scenes, we are looking at that and paying attention to it, and it is on our radar to accomplish, to get through every bit of what we do in terms of the business of Parks, Rec, and Culture. So you can see that there. So then, I think that was the slide I meant to, so that was what I was just talking about. And then just some capital to remind you, it's about $141,000, RTU number 3, kitchen floor replacement, and some shutdown week items. The CRC budget itself really sees a revenue increase of about $118,000, and quite frankly, that's due to cheer and dance, mostly cheer. Our cheer program is just booming. So that's helping on the revenue side, and then expenditures only changed by about $6,000, and that's a minor personnel cost, and you can see there's a IT transfer here as well. And then the next slide is the expansion slide. Again, on finances, 1.5 million is revenue, so that's the little bump that I was talking about in the slide with the different lines. $121,000 increase, and quite frankly, that's just a projection in terms of revenue for next year for memberships. And then on the expenditure side, it's about 41,000 or 2%, and that's the staffing as well, and another IT transfer increase. So any questions on the rec center? Yes, sir.
While we're talking about the rec center, I was sitting in the hot tub the other day and I started to notice that some of those big air vents that, are angled along the ceiling, especially the one that's right above the kids' play structure, looks like paint's already peeling off.
Yeah. We're well aware, we've had that issue since we opened.
It doesn't look like it's happening on any of the other pipes. I don't know if it's- Oh, you already have?
Yeah, we've repainted.
It's needed paint, so this big type of paint is supposed to actually hold up in that environment, or that's a lot.
Yes.
If you look at the air handling section that's right to the side of the hot tub too, you'll see that it's really, we've kind of got those messages.
Yeah, good question.
Just seemed a little soon because of the rec center, my part's only been open for 3 years now.
That's been an area that we've,
3 months in?
yeah,
So it's still a warranty
Yeah.
issue.
yeah, we've been challenged with that since we opened. So, any other questions, rec center? All right, so we'll move into cemetery.
Okay, we're backtracking.
So here's a great part. You remember I said last time we had 2 meetings? You just got through one of them. We're going to head into so cemetery. You've heard me say before, every time I've been here, quite frankly, we had Johnny Martinez as our cemetery technician. He left in January. And I've run cemeteries other places.
And that's on page 42?
Thank you.
If you're,
I've run cemeteries other places, and sometimes they can be a real heartache to run and lots of issues. Never had that issue with Johnny. And Stephen Eccles came on board in late July, early August. It's been seamless. He has done a really good job. So I would echo my same comments that I was saying about Johnny so far year to date with Stephen. Don't worry about the cemetery. So it's been a great hire for us in terms of, I don't go home and worry about when's Bob or Shane or any of you going to call me and say, we got an issue. We've had a couple of small things, but it has nothing to do with staff. It was just some requests that we've had to deal with. So we had another successful Memorial Day event. Year to date, we've had 29 burials. I think actually, and Bob sent me the information, it's probably 30 because we had another one this morning. 17 of them were cremations. Last year at this point, we had 31 and 19 in cremation. So basically the same amount from 18 to 19.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Cemetery?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I ask this a lot. How many plots have not been bought? I mean, what's our volume or what's our vacancy or whatever?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I will talk to Crystal and find out. I know we are adding the new software now, which will be able to spit that data out pretty quick. So thanks for asking. I have not thought about that in a long time. We will find that out.
But it is a good question because we're pretty consistent with the number of burials a year in
so we
cremation. So not only can we plan as we bring new areas on to know we're making sure our cremation and our burial are right, but we'd also know our build out and know, geez, in 2038 we run out of space here. So we really need to know that, Paul.
Thank you. So this slide just kind of is a breakout of where the work has occurred in terms of percentage of work and what the staff has done. This pretty much half the year Johnny, half the year Stephen. But you can kind of see where the work's been done. I will point out that the big difference has been in native mowing over here. Seen about a 13% increase and about a 10% increase in turf maintenance over here. So, and when I say the native mowing, we're talking about, when we get to capital here in a second, we're talking about the place between 257 and 392 in the sidewalk where it's not irrigated grass. We just call that native grass because it's not even really native, it's weed. Staff really has done a great job of making sure that section of the cemetery is as nice as it can be until we can get to a capital project. There are no changes in this budget in terms of anything noteworthy. Capital expenditure I was just talking about, so this is the portion that's kind of an eyesore right here and right there. And so that's where staff spend a lot of time, kind of trying to do their best to keep it as pretty as possible, but you'll talk about that again tomorrow.
Eric, is all of the cemetery project, whatever we want to call it, is that all complete?
It is done with the exception of some punch list stuff, but yes, for all intent.
Plants, trees,
It is
sod.
correct. Yes.
You have to border, like we could do a site visit to the cemetery.
Sure.
Before it gets too cold, like we did at the Parks building. I think it'd be good. It looks great there. I think it'd be nice to maybe start out a meeting there, Mayor, and just do a quick tour and then. I like the theme.
We're actually
I like
getting, we can't do it on Halloween because I'm really scaring the neighborhood kids in the neighborhood I live in, so I prefer not that day.
You just put on your Stiller uniform?
I wear Bronco stuff and sit on the corner and, throw L's at them. So this is the financial review, but you can see it's pretty self-explanatory. A minor decrease in terms of revenue and a minor decrease in terms of expenditure. So again, pretty much same budget year over year. Any questions on cemetery? Yes, sir.
We have those columbariums out there, right?
Yes.
Do we charge the same for those as we do for flat?
I think it's less, but I would need to check. Is it, do you know how much, Bob? Yeah. We'll get that answer for you. And it's been, as Shane said, it's been pretty consistent in the last few years where, like 30 and 20, of the 30 burials, 20 of them are cremations. Any other questions? Cemetery? Next one's forestry. So our forestry division's had another great year. Beautiful flowers. If you haven't seen them, hurry up because they'll be gone in another few days.
And that starts out on page 43, but it's really, the meat of it is on page 44.
Yeah, thank you. So they spend a lot of time tree and bed maintenance, and I'll show you some slides here in a second, but that group that really does a lot of work, a lot of consultation that you never even see when residents calling in ask about trees and those kind of things. As you know, the emerald ash borer was recently found in Larimer County, so I expect to probably get more questions in the next coming years about that. No change in terms of the budget for that yet next year. They just completed a project at Founders Park. If you haven't seen it off of Grant Avenue, drive by. Used to be a lot of really tall and thick bushes where they've eliminated them because it's kind of some sightline issues where you could maybe have someone hiding in the bushes or you couldn't see your kid on one playground to the next. So we removed them and done some planning where you can kind of see through and visibility is much nicer. They're getting ready to start Highland Meadows doing the same thing out there, so that renovation will occur before the end of the year. And then something we all should celebrate, and I know that we do, that's the picture in the center there with the mayor, but Arbor Day, we celebrated 38 years of Arbor Day this year, so quite impressive legacy that the town's got going on there.
It's a pretty cheap budgeting trick to show a picture of the mayor in the slideshow. I
But
feel
it-
like that's
Next year will be every photo.
yeah.
The 2019 forestry highlights, so up here, as you know, we kind of have a 6-year plan to go through every quadrant of the community and trim the street trees that we're responsible for. This is year 3 of that 6-year plan, then we'll start back over once we get through it. Staff has already trimmed, I believe, 150 trees of the 541 total. So what's that tell you? Fall is when we trim trees. And when the leaves come off, Blake and the crew will be crazy busy before heavy snow hits. So kind of show you that. And you really can't see it in the map here, but it's up there. We mark and track and cartograph every tree is in our system. So when they do work, it's plugged in there. So if you ever want to know, I can give you the details where you can see it a little better on the slide. But what trees were worked on every year, it'll be in cartograph and we can pull that report.
Eric, last year, 2018 was 725.
Thank you. Yep, appreciate that. Just kind of a breakout of where tasks that crew does. You can see that about 37% is horticulture, 63% is forestry. That's a 4% increase if you look back at last year's slide in horticulture. A lot of that is the many roundabouts that we're adding, and we've got more coming online. So that's that, and this is your roundabout slide. That cost is probably going to jump pretty much because the 2 new Liberty roundabouts just come online. We're going to renovate the cemetery roundabout. Quite frankly, as you probably would have hoped to agree, it looks pretty ugly. So we're going to fix that one so it looks like the rest of our roundabouts. And then I expect to see more maintenance needed. We just added the one at 7th Street and New Liberty, as well as the one up at Rain Dance. You know, it's doing pretty good, but over the years, weeds start to pop up more. And so we have full maintenance of about 9 roundabouts right now, with that growth probably continuing. And then this one also has a staffing piece here. And this really, as Shane said, is add a staffing, part-time year-round, a seasonal, 25 hours, or 25 weeks, thank you, for about 15 hours over the course of the summer to help Treasure Island. Since I've been here, Treasure Island folks, those volunteers, they do a yeoman's job. 2 tons of vegetables and fruits. They really educate the public. And the slide on the right, this one, kind of slapped me in the face a little bit when, you know, I kind of assumed that, yeah, Treasure Island was a busy place, but not that busy. In the survey from our strategic plan, 22% of residents are visiting that every year. That's a lot. That's a great amount of people, significant amount of people that are visiting it to educate themselves about plants that they should be planting in their yard to save water. So it really does play an integral role in our community. And that group of volunteers is aging, and every year they've been asking, and we do our best, but it kind of came to a head a little bit this year where, you know, there were people with health issues and people out of town, and we couldn't do some stuff. And then when we see these results in the survey, I really think that having some summer help to do some heavy lifting, do some weed pulling, dedicated to those folks, managed by our staff, but dedicated to them is imperative to do this year.
And I just want to clarify that we had met with them, talked about it with staff, and agreed that some nominal help, really was more than justified. You know, they need help with like the weed pulling, moving the irrigation around, some of the trash hauling. They're gonna still send their master gardeners out, they're gonna still do a lot of that work. But then when we saw the results, we thought, my gosh, this just more than justifies it. So we didn't say, geez, we got an asset, let's support it. I think we agreed internally, let's support this asset. And then when we saw the results, we were all floored. We'd still be recommending it if it were 10% of people.
Absolutely.
It was just.
So are we taking some of that into our own parks and gardens, like Main Park, where we are maybe thinking about more perennials or things that don't have to every year be planted, but that come back up on their own? I mean, because that's a lot of what they have out there, right? And so I'm wondering if maybe you could even use them to look at, help us, so that, I mean, again, it would cut down on having to plant things every year if we were planting perennials versus annuals. And maybe, you know, instead of not making sure we have those.
In our parks, that answer is yes. What you're seeing us replant every year is a lot of our downtown pots outside of the rec center, pots outside of this building. That's where that kind of turnover in plants is occurring. So, but yes, we do learn from
I just
that.
got around by the gazebo though, aren't we planting? It looks like we're planting.
So
them
that's another
all
area
the
that we
time.
do plant.
And I think maybe we should look at putting perennials in there around in that, so
Okay.
that would just decrease the maintenance time. And then, I mean, you have to go out there and make sure they're all coming up and whatever.
Right.
but
Yeah,
it's-
you're correct. That the gazebo is another area that we annually plant. So just some summary of changes. So Treasure Island improvements is about $20,000. This isn't the staffing piece. Currently, they are irrigating with hoses and sprinklers, and that is not great low water use of water there. So we are going to install an irrigation system. Staff's going to install it so they can be on timers. It will also lessen the need for a volunteer to go out there and hand water. It can all be on a timer, can be measured, and that was part of one of our park audits that we did with our grant that we got this year. They've asked for shade structure, something super simple, and in a tough shed. So that's the $20,000 increase. Irrigation, some shade, and something to store their equipment in, shovels, that kind of stuff. So there's an increase there. Increased roundabout work that I already talked about, and then we plan on renovating the town hall beds out front next year as well. So financials here, really no change on the revenue side, about a $46,000 increase on the expenditure side, or 10%. That is staffing costs, and then what I just talked about in terms of the Treasure Island improvements. So, any questions on forestry?
My question is on that paper public garden, I don't know what you think about in terms of shade structure. It's just a little point.
Mhm.
Maybe some artistic design to that or something.
Okay.
You have so many people that like that, people visit there. That might be an opportunity to have something that's a little bit more artistic than just
Good thought.
a wall.
Right.
Put it
Okay.
without spending $1 million.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you threw the caveat in there. Oh, Dean, it's a $500,000, not $1 million, sorry. Any more questions on forestry? Okay. Next one is parks. What page is that? So 2019, another solid year for parks in terms of maintenance and upkeep. Group really is kind of the behind the scenes,
And Parks is on page 48.
Thank you. They're the ones that make sure after the 1.5 million people have visited our park system and used our fields and facilities, that the next day the trash is picked up, the bathrooms are cleaned, the grass is cut, the weeds are pulled, edged, etc.
And I'm sorry, that's 47. I'm back. I don't think it's following along, but it's page 47. I'm sorry.
It's E4.
So, again, I want to kind of recognize the parks folks, and also recognize Bobby Warner and his staff, who use two of Bob's people to manage currently Diamond Valley. They hopefully won't have to do much next year. Chimney Park and the Eastman Park, that's where our athletic complexes are there. So we have two parks people that work, bless you, work under Bobby and his team. So combine those two teams really make our parks, when you drive by or you use them, sparkle. And we saw that as well in our survey of the public, where people really enjoy our park system, and they use it, almost love it to death sometimes, and it's because it's so great. Yes, sir.
I would concur, except here's the asterisk. At Main Park, the horseshoe pit looks like it's gone.
Understand.
Do we have any plans to do anything to revitalize that area of Main Park?
We have been debating that question for quite a while now and don't have a adequate answer to give you in terms of, because everybody has tons of different ideas, from putting things like outdoor ping pong tables and chess sets to just grassing it to...
Yeah, we did, they talk about cornhole.
Yeah,
put
talk
in
about
the built-in cornholes.
So we just have not made a decision. I agree with your thought and sentiment. We're doing our best to make it look as nice as possible until we figure out a solution. You know, I've had at Harvest Festival, I had pickleball people. Can you turn it into a pickleball court? You know, so I don't.
I like the cornhole idea.
Yeah, great question. We'll come up with a solution.
Modern day horseshoes.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there still a horseshoe club?
No, the Horseshoe Club went away about a year and a half ago. Turned over the keys, so no, that has gone away. That's great. Yeah, there was a club, and I think Tara got the keys from the gentleman the last day, and it was a difficult, emotional moment when it was down to one person and he turned the keys over. So
We've always owned it.
yeah, they've kind of had the use of it as their facility, and they did a lot of maintenance back then. Yep, absolutely. So then, beyond maintenance and upkeep, 3 projects that occurred this year. Main Park Shelter was built. That was Kendra's project. Bob assisted her on that, so I want to thank them both for getting that done. Looks much better and really is a big asset with a new playground. Windshire Park was also built, developer built. So Parks took that over mid-year after we opened. So that added some more to their plate. And then Village East Park also, a week or 2 later, opened. That's added more work to the plate of Parks, and that was Tara's project, so good job for her as well, getting that project done. But ultimately, in the end, Parks picked up those two to pick up, and then this year, just as you've seen in a couple of recent memos, we now own Jacoby Farm, so that's another site that Parks is going to have to do some maintenance on, even though it's not going to be used as a park in this next year. We're going to need to maintain it and make sure the weeds and grass and that kind of stuff, and do some work there. So wanted to thank them for that work. Highlights here, you can kind of see where work's done in our community parks. Quite just in comparison, mowing and irrigation grew by 8 and 9% from one year to the next. So that's that. Neighborhood park work, same kind of comparison. Trash went up by 4% and irrigation went up by 13% from one year to the next. So again, staff's doing a lot of work in those 2 parks. And then the last one that we kind of track is the CRC Town Hall and PD maintenance. For me, the one big positive was snow dropped by 9%. So cross your fingers, even though we're supposed to get 1 to 3 inches on Thursday. I'm hoping that snow stays down as well, but you can see kind of where the maintenance has gone on. And then summary, one of the things that we're seeing a drop in revenue that you'll see in another slide is park shelter rentals are down. Not a lot, but they're down. So we're going to do a better job marketing that next year. Beach sand replacement, we typically do about $2,000 or $3,000 a year. We're going to do 6, and we need to kind of catch up there. We're also turning that sand over twice a week instead of once. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Futures contract with the Future Legends, we'll cut them a check for $24,000 for their side of the maintenance. And then, as I mentioned, Parks now will have a full year of 3 new parks, Village East, Windshire, and Jacoby. So more work on their plate. The capital projects that you'll talk about next or tomorrow, Eastman Park, Main Park, Jacoby Farm, and Harmony Ridge. And then the revenue side of Parks, you can see there's a decrease of about $4,200, which really is shelter rentals, and I think we can do a better job there. And then there's also a decrease in overall expenditures. And then the kind of the bullet line there where you see the IT transfer, there's also an increased fleet transfer there as well. But those don't go into the decrease. So, you know, They've taken on a lot more work and actually cut costs. Any questions on parks?
Why do you think there's been a decrease in the shelter rental?
Anecdotally, I think that we don't market it enough and don't police it enough. People just go use it. I don't think they're not using our parks and our shelters. They're just not paying for it. That's what I think.
I would concur.
And then last but not least, open space and trails, the golden boy.
And so that starts on page 46, and really the meat of it is on page 47.
So 2018 was a year when we split parks and open space into one, and that was a big transition year between bringing Bob online and Wade. And, year 2 of this has just been continued growth. Kudos to Wade in growing programming. I've seen a big emphasis in biking and walking to school, a big emphasis in rediscussions now of even things that haven't really been on our plate with safe routes to school. So he's really begun to lead that effort there, and I really appreciate it. And then even as we just saw recently with the $2 million grant, I can tell you that, yeah, we got this $2 million grant. We partnered with Larimer County. Wade did all of the work on our end. I did 0. And don't know that I could have even participated if it wasn't for having Wade dedicated to open space and trails. It would have been a struggle to even get to be part of that partnership on the Poudre. We would have got it done, but it would have been difficult. So kudos to Wade for getting that. And then I have other up there because I wanted to make sure that everybody understands what other means, because Wade has an other role between open space and trails. And so that's on the screen here. He really does manage our non-potable water system. So he works with John and Omar, but when the alarms go off at Kiger, or as you were telling us the other day, I think it was at the Kern, and Wade got an alarm that was backing up, and he left whatever he was doing, drove to the park, and found boys that had plugged the ditch up with rocks and were stuffing trees and actually backing the water up. He gets that phone call. He deals with that, and he gets to put the hammer down on it when this kind of things happen. So that's part of his other role. He also leads our development review every week, every Tuesday morning, 7:30. He, Bob, myself, Tara, Kendra, we all meet and go over development review for everything else that's going on. He's our Poudre Heritage Alliance liaison, actually the president this year. Also part of the Coalition for Lower Poudre, and he does our grants, and he's the relationship builder. When we're trying to get easements, or we're trying to get donations of land and open space and that kind of stuff, or we want to build a trail through somebody's property, it's Wade. So really, open space and trails, and then other. So I wanted you to recognize that there's a lot of work there that's behind the scenes that you don't see. And it might take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to come to fruition, but if you don't have that person kind of building that relationship with the landowner, it never happens. So appreciate the fact that you allow us to split those duties. Now, trail users. This one's crazy. You can see, and we've added more trail counters. So the top 2 are Eastman Park and Boardwalk Park. We've seen a 13% increase of those 2 eco counters from 18 to 19. But then when we started counting other places, and we now have 8 eco counters, almost 500,000 users on our trail system year to date. So when you think about the emphasis and the use of trails, and we think back to what people wanted us to invest in, trails and open space, or 4 or 5 of the top 10 items. Over 500,000 people are using our trail system today that we know of. So there's a lot to be said with that kind of data and some decisions that we can make. Breakdown of trail work, you can kind of see where the work's going on. Probably a little slight decrease in mowing and trash, but a slight increase in terms of trail repairs. And as you'll see on the next slide, we are asking, as Shane talked about, a full-time staff member, and I'll tell you why. There's a lot of work, 40 miles of trails, lots of open space. We've always had one seasonal for 25 weeks. Wade, you've been here 100 years, how long? 18 years. I don't believe in his 18 years that he's ever had a seasonal for 25 weeks. We never can keep them the entire time. So what happens is that burden is placed on the park staff. So you heard, for example, they're taking on 3 new parks, and then when Wade doesn't have staff, they have to compensate for trash pickup, repairs, mowing, et cetera, et cetera. So that is why you see the proposed staffing. We'll also eliminate the position, and as Shane also said, by bringing an in-house person, we can save money on contractual weed spraying to basically make it a wash, but allow Wade to have someone 52 weeks a year, except for vacations, and really have someone dedicated and take that burden off of parks for helping out as much as they do, because they do jump in a lot and have done a lot of that work that you saw in the previous pie chart. So pretty much that position's a wash. And then some challenges or kind of changes or focus areas for Wade and his team: continued outreach, walk and bike to school, safe routes to school, summer programming that he's going to introduce next year, projects, trailhead signs, restoration project at Chimney Park, that one corner that's native and pretty ugly, and we always get complaints from neighbors. We're going to fix that next year. And then contracted services. We have in there Kiger master plan, so that site, asking the public, what do you want to see happen with that parcel? You want to leave it as it is? Would you like to see some kind of passive recreation, like walking around there, bird watching, that kind of stuff? So asking them that. Spraying in-house, replacement of the dog park steps. We get complaints annually, and quite frankly, it happens because of the freeze and thaw of the lake. And then there's some money in there to look at, I think I'm speculating, but I believe what will come out of the strategic plan is that we should be looking and having discussion with this board as how to fund open space and trails. And so when that's done, there's some money in there to begin some engagement there to understand what should we do. Let's analyze what money do we need to build trails, because as you'll see tomorrow on the capital side, we have a plan for parks. We don't have the funding to build out our trail system and our open space system. So we need to figure that out. And so there's some money in next year's budget to help us move that ball down the road a little bit. Because as you can see, when you have 500,000 users of your trail system, that number's only growing. And that's year to date. I'm guessing we'll probably add another 100 before the year's out. That number's only growing. The demand, as we saw in the strategic plan, is more trails, more connectivity. Well, how do you pay for it? We need to figure that out. So there's some money there for that. Yes, sir.
I was glad to see that in there, because it's almost weekly somebody asks me about trail connectivity, especially from the west side of the hill. And I was involved in Parks and Rec for 2 years before I was on the board. So 7 years ago, we were talking about connectivity, and I've never even seen conceptual plans. All we've ever heard is $5 million.
Right.
It feels like we keep putting it off, and so I know we talked about maybe a foundation or some kind of tax-free entity to get some grants. I think we need to move forward on this as quickly as possible. So I was hoping to see or something in the budget to even start the process of forming a foundation or whatever it might be.
So that, I wouldn't say that money is designed for that. It could be. I will say that Tara is going in November to foundation school, NRPA foundation school, to learn about how to get that off the ground. So that's a side piece, but that can go towards things like open space and trails, public art, other replacement of a picnic shelter, whatever it might be. So we do need to get into that realm of funding.
Well, and I think in addition to trails, I think open space is kind of a concurrent discussion we need to have.
Yes.
As these communities continue to grow, I think to identify ourselves is going to become more important. And I think is we acquire open space, and that helps us on the population side, not building out too big. And then I think the third element is, at least to some extent, if people are acquiring these parcels for water and for the town, or maybe like raw water, there may be a lot of reasons to have these discussions. Keep the water in Colorado, maybe keep a farmer farming long term,
right? And
then we get our open space. So I think to me they're really piecemeal, not piecemeal. I'm sorry, they really go together. They're mutually inclusive. And then when we did our strategic plan, we really reached out to the public. You know, I thought we heard pretty clearly that funding for open space and trails was a
Yes.
priority.
Mhm.
And I think we need to have a sense of urgency about this as we're growing. Each month, there's going to be fewer and fewer opportunities.
Yes,
that's right.
Costs go up all the time, so the sooner we can come up with a plan and a funding mechanism, 20 years from now, people are going to say thank you.
Right, well, you know, you or may recall last year, we had a request from the city of Greeley. They were looking at acquiring a large tract, and was it 5 million total? Or
It was
10
10, it was 10 total, the Sureview property.
Yeah, the Sureview, and so, you know, Greeley had its 5 million or whatever it had, and the town was about 5 million short.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that was necessarily our opportunity, but right now, the town doesn't have any money set aside.
Right, yep.
Full speed ahead, please.
Thank you. And then, so the next slide is just the capital, just a quick review. To your point, Mr. Bennett, on the trail system, there is $1.4 million in capital next year for trail connection. So the bridge over 13 to 392 to connect to Kiger, and then the number 2 ditch trail construction from High Hops to 13. So there is a significant investment there. And then it's not on this slide, but you'll also remember that when you'll see in planning, the TMP has 6 quick wins. Assuming those are approved, I think 4 of the 6 are all trail related. So there is I would argue that in my 4 years here, 2020 will be the biggest shift in terms of investment and movement in the trail system, both from planning and from trails and open space.
I would say there's 4 to 6 are not vehicular related.
Correct.
So yeah, like Walnut Trail,
Right.
7th Street.
Walking and biking stuff. Yes, great clarification. Poudre Trail repair there, master plan the Kiger, as I previously mentioned, and then archery range project and expansion over there, pending the CPW grant that we're getting ready to apply for. And then I think the last slide, kind of the open space and trails financial review. So there's about $8,000 in revenue, but 289%. It's a pretty significant jump, even though it's not that much money. Kodak Farm Lease, Bike Windsor classes, which is a lot of Wade's initiatives, and then Memorial Bench and Engraving Program, which we've seen a pretty good bump this year in that area. Then expenditures, an increase of about $92,000 or 33%. Really, that is staffing. Signage, and I want to point out what signage is. The Historical Preservation Commission has asked for 2 signs at Boardwalk. They don't have any money, so they asked us to put it in the budget. So there's $10,000 in there for 2 signs. We will also probably apply for a grant through the Poudre Heritage Alliance to help offset or maybe pay for it all, but we budgeted for those 2 signs. Then the Kiger Master Plan. So with that being said, that's kind of the open space and trails. If you have any questions on that or anything else in the budget, that is the presentation for the Parks, Rec, and Culture Department. Anything I can answer?
And so, obviously, we're going to talk about the capital tomorrow night. I know the board's going to have that discussion, but I would ask if you have any questions that are like more in Eric's realm now. For those questions, you know, like more technical things on Parks and Rec, I'd say ask them now. I know the board's going to talk more about it tomorrow night. Maybe if you're going to have a question really in the weeds tomorrow night, if he's not going to be there, I'd rather you ask him now while he's standing here.
I would just anticipate that there'll be some discussion of the width. I've been thinking about that one a lot lately. And because, you know, when it first came up, it was, you know, kind of an interesting concept and sometimes you could joke about. But as we go through this whole process, you know, I see like, we have a very active senior community. I'm very proud of that. Windsor has that. And, you know, like the meals, pickleball, lots of other things. But I kind of was thinking about the women, I'm like, what have we done besides youth sports? Obviously, we did a great job. But I was looking at the women as something, you know, I'm confident it's going to pay for itself, probably in less than 4 years. And so I was just thinking, you know, something that we could do. You know, we always talk about what are there for young people to do in Windsor. You know, this would be something that we could try. So I don't really see this as an experiment per se. but to see how it goes and see if it's successful and see what the community thinks. I think if you build it, they're gonna come, there's no doubt in my mind, it'll be a good attraction, so that's something that, I don't know why, while Eric's here, that's kind of what my thought has been on it. But it seems like it's always been, when we talk about capital, it seems like in the last couple of years, it's something that just kind of, even though it's not our biggest expense, it seems to have a lot of discussion. But I guess my only point is, that's kind of, I've had to kind of shift in thinking to, to support it.
I do have questions about the Riverwalk master plan.
Sure.
So this is getting into capital loss more. Just, first of all, I love the idea of doing something here. Question about the source of funds, and how much the town should do, how much maybe is other opportunities. I think, I'm doing this from memory now, we had $1 million or something there for flood mitigation.
It's 1.5 million. The total project is,
Is that coming out of park funds?
so that's part of the project, yes. So the project is funded, and Carl, you jump in if I'm missing this, but the bulk of it, about 3 million, is being funded out of our community park fund, which will basically eliminate that fund for the most part, which is good. That's what we're trying to do, because remember we had neighborhood park fund, community park fund, and now we have park improvement fund. These two eventually will go away and we'll just have one. So about 3 million of it, if my memory serves me right, comes out of community park fund. The other $1 million comes out of this park improvement fund, but it pays for the build out of Eastman Park. And so that's phase 1 of the Riverwalk, which is $4 million, which is, for the most part, as Shane alluded to, it's the same elements in the project that were in the 2015 master plan that the board saw and approved, with the exception of about
It's about 3.2 million is what's already been approved in the parks master plan.
and it adds another 700.
Yeah, about $700,000-$800,000 is new.
Extra.
And about half of that is the parking.
Yeah, like 400,000 of the 800,000 is the parking on the north side of Eastman Park that we talked about earlier, to Barry's question and concern about parking.
Do you have that slide you sent me? I don't know how to pull that up.
I have it on my computer. I could
Okay.
pull it out.
Well,
So to your point though,
didn't we do implementation just a year or two ago there?
no, so that was, what that was, a couple of years ago, Dennis used to budget, and it's still in there, $75,000 annually for Poudre River work.
Okay.
We went in there and put the river channel back to its original location, so we created that island that's there now.
Was this designed to flood
Into the, correct. And so the flood mitigation that we have is basically benching of that field back. How far do you think, Wade? A third of that property maybe, or so? So it's benching of that, so that based on flood levels, it doesn't just disperse across the whole flat field, it's benched. So that's about 1.5 million of that project. And that was in the original plan as well.
And that needs to come out of?
That should come out of the park fund unless we find another funding source. I will tell you that we are working with NISP on some funding there, but we're trying to work through some logistics. The budget doesn't represent their dollars, but we could see some dollars from them if we were to agree. Yes, if we were to agree, because we are, as we sit today on the table, their #1 downstream mitigation project. So there's some dollars there if we want, but we're trying to work that out in terms of funding.
And so basically, they would need, in this project, they need to reduplicate some wetlands.
Yeah.
And so the idea would be that they would do flood mitigation in our park.
Correct.
But then it would be dedicated wetlands from our standpoint and unusable. So that's kind of the dance.
Right.
If there's a way to fund
Yeah.
portions of the park that we don't really need, we can get some revenue coming back in on a
Right.
project we're participating in. There could be a real win in there for us.
Right.
But what we don't want to do is tie up so much of our parkland for a fairly small amount. It's just that the property's
Right.
We
And
won't know about that until after the record decision. That potential to this, it's gotta be at least a year or two down the road.
Oh, please, God, no. I hope we get a.
No, I mean, any funding that would come to us for flood mitigation.
So if we did funding, this conversation is a little old, a couple months. If we did funding and accepted their dollars for flood mitigation, their goal was to have some of that funding by the end of 2020, so that we could be, so if the Eastman Park Riverwalk Phase 1, or let's call it, whether that was, maybe that's the final phase, if that's approved, the first part of the year is going to be design, the actual construction documents. So we're not gonna, you won't see any construction out there probably until later 2020 anyway. Correct.
And the board will recall that every year with NISP, they talk about kind of two pods. One is a pod of like the legal fees and just kind of the ongoing cost for NISP. And next year we're ramping it up some. And you know, part of that's going to be like, well, do they start to buy some farms, you know, for water? Are they doing other things? And so I think if this project came in, you know, they are collecting from all the partners money to start doing some of these things. So it's not unimaginable that money would come in from that. To me, the biggest risk is that just we tie up too much of our park and we take what should be future parking or future expansion and tie that into wetlands forever.
And let me back up too. Regardless of that funding source, the reason why the flood mitigation is in that plan is not only for the flooding side of it, but the education. So a lot of the access down to that side of the river is for school kids to go do microinvertebrate studies, to get kids in the river, to see wetlands, to see how they function, how they live and breathe every day. So while it may not seem like kind of like a sexy amenity, it really is for education of our public and especially school kids to understand, you know, how does a wetland function? What do the birds and the wildlife do? How do they live there? That kind of stuff. So that's why I think it should be included in, you know, in paid for if we don't have a funding like in this through parks.
So I don't want to run the fund and have our entire team from our night. You know, so we were thinking of plans for
Yes, I do have a question. It's about this again. Where would the proposed parking be?
So this is Eastman Park. What we call internally north, that's the skate park. So it would improve this parking lot here, the kind of the dirt lot, the crusher and grind, crusher fun area, put in some, so right now that's kind of just open, you park wherever the heck you want. Putting in some curb stops so that people park more organized. Putting in a large parking lot down here. So the road goes in, it would go east towards the park and fill that berm in. It's about a $300,000, almost $400,000 number to put in parking here. And then some additional parking parallel along this corner of the road there.
Okay, so how many total spots is it?
I'll have to look it up.
650,000 as a part of the project?
No, it's 400. I'd have to, I need to look it up. I don't know the number off the top of my head.
The
But
breakdown that you gave me was 400. Somebody else had mentioned a higher number, so I don't know if we had.
I'll look. And then there's additional parking and improvements down in here on this side as well.
So could that be if we piecemealed out this whole thing, could that be a fast track project to get that done before the next rec season in the spring?
I would love for that to be approved. We need that, as Shane said earlier, and I would hope that you wouldn't, but if you chose to delay this, that does not need to be delayed.
Right, so how many, my thing is, I know that we have a agreement of some sort with the Catholic Church. But the Catholic Church every once in a while has something going on the weekend when we have programming. We've also talked about how we can't have Sunday programming because obviously they're meeting at the church and they're meeting, using their parking lot. So how many parking spaces does the church have? And would this compensate for the church parking?
It would compensate some. Let me do the math and give you an answer tomorrow before your meeting. But it would compensate some, but not in total. It wouldn't be a swap, one for one. You know what I mean? But I can get you that answer.
But that, none of this includes land purchase in that light gray
It does not.
or parking or something else?
No, correct. There is no land purchase here. I will tell you that if you look at the long-term, so there's, I think it was I'm going off the top of my head now, $15 million total project. This phase being 4. When you get into phase 2 and 3, there is some land purchase to be considered there if we wanted to do that. But that's down the road.
We were, I was curious on how many parking spots we'd be adding on it.
I will get you that first thing in the morning.
Well, yeah, we could probably need engineers to take a look at the games paving that one lot.
Yeah, and I can't remember whether the breakdown, and I don't know, I'm looking at Wade if you happen to recall. I know it's, I can't remember if it marked out in the estimate in terms of number of spaces. I don't remember.
Yeah, you're right, Paul, like in the church, some of them said to either have a wedding or a funeral or some other special event. We did meet with church leadership last year, and they let us know that we were impacted. We didn't know we were on all day, because that wasn't our intent at all. So I think we opened up a lot of our communication with them, and we'll also start the signs that we tell our patrons to park somewhere else to the church event. That, you know, they're like every other entity in the community, which is they're just getting more popular, more use, and so we don't want to get, you know, on the wrong side of the races there. So a couple of soccer events I've gone to, they're using that parking is.
Well, and some of their services, et cetera, flow over into our parking.
Absolutely.
Well, which is, but it's not really the same. I mean, for them, we've got public parking open to anybody. And so it's a nice symbiotic relationship, but we have a church event.
I would just like to see, and I'm just saying, throwing this out there, I'd like to see us not have to use their parking lot. I mean, just from this is the town, they're gracious, whatever the agreement we have is, I wish, you know, even if it was, you know, going south on that road from the skate park, et cetera, and that leads into other parking versus everybody having to park on the other side of the river as they overflow, you know, and then having to walk over, that's a lot.
And we can definitely look at, let's run the numbers, but then if need to, we could probably look at expanding that even more.
Yeah, eventually.
Mr. Practicality, so
Right.
that's fine with parking. If we expand.
And to Paul's point, that piece in the gray probably is that area because there is a significant drop right here from like the end where the road ends. It really starts to drop off, and when you drop that much, it gets expensive. But on the other side of the road, it's almost flat.
Yeah, but I think Eric and I talked about a few months ago, like as the road runs through, you have that fence there, it's just kind of.
Right, take it out.
Yeah, just kind of take it out, and put angled parking or something in there, and really, you just got other thoughts on ways to take advantage of what's really adjacent to the park space and how to use it. But I think we've got, obviously, we need to do better. Okay.
Anything else? Thank you all.
And your whole team who's here.
So tomorrow night, we'll meet again at 5:30, we'll meet at First Floor Conference Room.